Welcome back to Grimoire Audiobooks. Today, we dive into the grand finale of Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by the ingenious Sarah 1281. This time-twisting adventure has taken us through hilarious moments, surprising alliances, and unforgettable twists. Now, as we explore Part 5, Chapters 41 to 50, the journey reaches its crescendo. In this final installment, questions will be answered, timelines will collide, and the fate of both the past and future will be decided. Can Harry outmaneuver his past selves and the chaos he's inadvertently unleashed? Will the threads of time weave back into order, or will they unravel completely? Prepare yourself for an epic conclusion that's equal parts witty, emotional, and utterly mind-bending. Sarah 1281 is a master of humor-infused storytelling and has delighted fans with her fresh take on Harry Potter through Oh God, Not Again, and its incredible sequel. Her unique ability to blend comedy, adventure, and deep character moments makes her work a favorite among readers and listeners alike. Disclaimer: this fanfiction is a transformative work based on J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. All original characters, settings, and trademarks belong to their respective owners. This reading is purely for entertainment purposes, with no copyright infringement intended. So, sit back, relax, and prepare for a magical roller coaster with Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281 at Grimoire Audiobooks. Once this video reaches 50 likes and 50 comments, we'll know you're ready for more magical adventures in the future. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay tuned for all our upcoming stories. Let's dive into the final chapters of this extraordinary journey. Chapter 41. It's finally here. George yelled a week and a half later at breakfast. "Save me, Harry," Fred begged. Harry winced as they were only sitting 3 seats down from him and looked up to find that the post had arrived. To be more specific, it appeared that Molly had finally gotten around to creating the perfect howler. Harry knew from years of her acquaintance that the longer it took after an incident she didn't approve of to receive a howler about it, the worse it would be. Idly, he leaned over and muttered, muffliato, as he tapped the smoking red letter. "You're a lifesaver, mate," Fred told him seriously. "I know," Harry agreed. "Hey, it looks like you made the front page again." "It's about the playoffs this time," George said, eyeing the Daily Prophet that had just been dropped in front of Harry. "Harry Potter and the Pentawizard Playoffs," by Rita Skeeter. "That sounds like the name of a book or something," Harry complained. "Although that is an idea. Doesn't the Daily Prophet have any other reporters?" Fred wondered. "Maybe they're on hand to check her facts," George suggested. "She spelled Crumb's name wrong in her notes and didn't even bother getting Cedric's, so if that's in there then we'll know someone edited it." Harry Potter is a 14-year-old wizard attending Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. That is probably the first introduction he's been given since that dreadful night 13 years ago that both orphaned him and freed us all. Potter has been known by many appellations since then. The boy who lived, Gryffindor's golden boy, the boy who silenced, hero, Pentawizard playoff champion. As everyone is no doubt aware by now, the Triwizard Tournament was initially scheduled to take place at Hogwarts this year, and Victor Crumb, Fleur Delacour, and Cedric Diggory were accordingly chosen to represent Durmstrang, Beaux Batons, and Hogwarts respectively. Then something unexpected happened. Fred Weasley was chosen to represent the newly founded Harry Potter School of Awesomeness, and Harry Potter himself was chosen to represent an American school. Harry's new headmistress was not available for comment, but the headmaster of the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness, our very own Gilderoy Lockhart, had this to say: "Fred is an outstandingly creative, albeit unconventional, student, and he has my full confidence." Weasley is not alone in his promise. Crumb is an international Quidditch sensation from Bulgaria. Delacour is the daughter of a prominent French official and widely rumored to be part Vila, and Diggory is the top of his class and the son of an important ministry official. How does Potter stack up against this? Very well, actually. His test scores have declared him a prodigy, but he hasn't let it go to his head. A close friend of Potter's, Draco Malfoy, had this to say: Harry's a good guy who doesn't take life too seriously. Of course, I can't vouch for his sanity, but we all have our faults. When questioned about his entry into the playoffs, Potter insisted that although he did enter to challenge his abilities, he only entered under the school bearing his name, and his nomination as an American candidate surprised him as much as anybody else. Is this a conspiracy? Are the Americans trying to steal some of Potter's glory for themselves? This reporter intends to find out. Potter is most often found in the company of his three closest friends, Ronald Weasley, Neville Longbottom, and Muggle-born Hermione Granger. Granger, along with the youngest Weasley, Ginevra, and the daughter of the Quibbly editor, Luna Lovegood, are the three stunningly pretty teenage girls competing for Potter's affection. Which one will be his source of strength throughout the playoffs and, ultimately, win his heart? Only time will tell. Well, that's just... Harry trailed off, searching for the right words. At least there's no mention of me crying this time. You cried during your interviews? George asked skeptically. Oh God, no, Harry assured him. I guess threatening to sue her for libel paid off then. Hey, Harry, do you have any idea what the first task is going to be? Fred asked. I know they said they want to see how well we adapt to high-pressure situations and all, but if your Scar has any idea, then that would be great. The best pranks involve a good deal of preparation, you know. Harry snapped his fingers.
Oh, right.
Follow me. With that, Harry made his way to the Hufflepuff table. Hey, Cedric. Nice article, Cedric greeted him. I noticed it was very interested in your love life and the other contestants, and I seemed kind of like an afterthought. Well, except Fred, but then he was from the Harry Potter school, so... Harry shrugged. You should be glad you made the article at all. I think they actually hired fact-checkers after that one time I sued them for libel. Because of those articles about your secret life as a drag queen? Cedric asked. I remember those. Harry grimaced. So, do I, unfortunately. I think that's why they avoiding mentioning the fact that my school is girls only. Anyway, my Scar knows what the first task is, so if you want to know, I'd suggest you follow me. Cedric immediately stood and followed him out of the Great Hall and into a deserted classroom. What's he doing here? Fred complained. Yeah. Where's your Gryffindor pride, Harry? George added. Sorry, guys, Harry said apologetically. But my Scar has no Gryffindor pride, and it won't tell me what the task is unless I tell you both, so... So what is it? Cedric inquired. Dragons, Harry said simply. I must be going deaf, George announced. Me too, Fred said. Because I could have sworn that I just heard you say dragons. There is no way in hell Dumbledore would expect us to fight a dragon, Cedric said flatly. I refuse to believe it. No, we're not fighting them, Harry agreed. Although that might actually be easier, all things considering. His fellow champions and George all paled considerable, wondering what could possibly involve a dragon but be worse than fighting it. We're supposed to steal a golden egg from nesting mothers. You know, now that I think on it, fighting a dragon wouldn't be all that bad, really, Fred said, sounding strangely high-pitched. Don't worry, we'll think of something, George assured him. You're positive? Cedric asked seriously. Harry nodded grimly. Cedric closed his eyes and took a deep breath.
Shit.
Harry shrugged apologetically and hurried off to potions. On the way he ran into Luna. I got a reply from the headmistress, she told him. Really? Harry was curious. What did it say? Luna just smiled at him and continued on her way. When he got there, he found the Slytherins discussing the article and was immediately grateful at how much milder this version was than the previous one. Even if he didn't really remember what the first article Skeeter had penned about him had said, he knew it had been painful. And that had been when she'd been on his side. Stunningly pretty? Granger? Pansy was shrieking. What was she judged against, a chipmunk? I wouldn't talk if I were you, Pansy, Harry said as he came to stand behind his rather vexed Muggle-born friend. Seeing as I heard, you came in third. Seeing as how Harry already knew what the task was and what he would be doing against it, he opted for sleep rather than meeting Hagrid and seeing the proof of it once more. He was kind of curious what fifth kind of dragon they would be flying in, but not enough to get out of bed for it. After all, he was a growing boy. Kind of. The day of the first task, McGonagall personally escorted him there. Now don't panic, she told him. Just keep a cool head. We've got wizards standing by to control the situation if it gets out of hand. The main thing to do is just do your best, and nobody will think any worse of you. Are you all right? Harry snorted. Why, Professor? Anybody would think that trying to steal an egg from a nesting mother dragon was dangerous and kind of irresponsible to ask of a 14-year-old. You know? McGonagall looked surprised. Harry merely tapped his forehead, and she sighed. Of course. Don't sweat it. I'll be fine, Harry promised. Besides, if I don't kick some major ass on this, Draco and the Hufflepuffs will never let me live it down. If you're sure, McGonagall said dubiously. I am, Harry said firmly. Thank you for the concern, though. McGonagall nodded jerkily and left him at the entrance to the tent. So, am I the only one who thinks that just by showing up we should probably be put on suicide watch? Harry said brightly as he entered the tent, breaking the gloomy atmosphere. You should have been on it the minute you went after that troll third year, Cedric said frankly.
Huh?
Third year? That had been his first, right? Cedric was 2 years older. How can you be so calm? Fleur demanded. We could very well die. In the first task? Harry asked incredulously. No way. If I die, I'm going to do it at the third, where all the press is. Professor Lockhart recommended much the same thing, Victor said. I vasn't sure whether he vas serious or not, though. Well, he's not serious. Harry made the obligatory pun, but you should take him seriously. If you want your death to be remembered, going during the third task is the way to go, right, Cedric? Why are you asking me? Cedric asked. Graveyards, Harry said, seemingly random. Run like hell, Cedric replied, having been asked this a good 4 dozen times since he'd been chosen as a champion alone. I don't want to die during the playoffs at all, Victor protested. Harry shrugged. Then don't worry about it. Only champions in the tent, boys, Ludo Bagman said, eyeing Fred and George, who were plotting in a corner. Now I may not know which of you is which, but only one of you is a champion. About that, George said. The Goblet of Fire said that the champion was Fred Weasley, and I legally changed my name last week, so I am now legally George Fred Weasley, and as such I am entitled to compete as well. Bagman looked gobsmacked. I'll have to run that by the other judges, certainly, and I'll get back to you before it's your brother's turn. Now, the task is to collect a golden egg from a nesting dragon. There are 5 models, and you will pick a miniature of the dragon you will face out of this bag. He waited, but the champions and George all spectacularly failed to react. Oh, come on, he said, annoyed. You could at least pretend to be surprised. Obligingly, Harry gasped. Gosh, this has got to be the most unexpected event I've ever encountered. Dragons? I don't think I've even seen a dragon. That's a little over the top, don't you think? Cedric asked. Harry shrugged. I'm reacting for 6 people here. Take it or leave it. Fred was the first to choose, and got the Welsh green. Cedric was second with a Chinese fireball. Fleur was third with the Swedish short. Harry actually got to pick this time, but somehow ended up with the Hungarian horntail again. Victor was last, and he got the previously unseen Peruvian vipertooth. Harry thought it was kind of strange that while everybody else got different dragons, he was stuck with the same one and the hardest too, but then again it might be kind of odd if none of them were a duplicate. When Bagman pulled him outside for a quick word right before running George's name change by the other judges, Harry cut him off with some advice. If you're betting I win the playoffs, make sure that your bet does not preclude a tie. I don't really see that happening, but you never know. I have been known to be stupidly noble like that. Cedric and Fleur, Harry presumed, did the same thing against their dragons, as he didn't see why anything he did would have made the do otherwise. Fred and George's attempt. Apparently the judges had voted in favor of letting them both compete. Strange. Lasted less than 5 minutes, and Harry had to admit that he was curious about what they could have possibly done. Then it was his turn. Sure, he was older and wiser now, and probably could have done something spectacular, but on the other hand, he really liked to fly. And he was amazing at it, so why should he mess with success? And just to avoid the uncomfortable standing around with everyone wondering what he was doing or if it worked, he had Neville bring his broom down with him, so he only needed to summon it from the crowd. After flying around for a bit and successfully irritating the Hungarian horntail to the point where she left her nest to go chasing after him, he totally copied Victor, who, since he had yet to go, would look like he was copying Harry, and cast a conjunctivitis curse at the dragon before swooping back down to grab the egg. Since, unlike Victor, he had the sense to lure the dragon away from the eggs before casting the curse, she didn't smash any of the eggs, so his precious points should be secure. "What did you guys do?" Harry demanded as soon as he saw the twins. "And why is Luna a judge?" "I transfigured a rock into a sheep and stuck a modified canary cream on it. When the dragon ate it, it transformed into a canary. Fred grabbed the egg and threw it to me," Fred explained. "If it turned it into a canary, how is it modified?" Harry asked, feeling oblivious. "Because they don't normally work on dragons," George explained. "We needed 2 people because while I was getting the distraction/immobilization ready, Fred was sneaky closer to the nest, and then since the canary cream only lasted for a minute, it was all we could do to get it back to safety before it transformed back," Fred continued. As for Luna, when George and I went out there to see if he could compete, Luna explained that even though the headmistress for the Salem Witches Academy was too busy to come personally, she had authorized Luna to act in her place, and that included judging, George concluded. "Wow," Harry said admiringly. "I should have thought of that." "That may have been too insane even for you," Cedric suggested. Harry shuddered. "Don't say that, F." At that moment Crumb stormed into the medical tent. "I did not copy you," he hissed. "I never said you did," Harry pointed out, confused. "They do," Victor said, gesturing towards the crowd. "And this despite the fact I could not even hear that Vass going on from the tent." Harry shrugged. "Sorry." With that, Harry went to go find his friends to see if they could tell him how the other champions did. Apparently Cedric had just managed to avoid an injury when the dog he'd transfigured a rock into lost the dragon's interest, but his shirt did catch on fire, much to the delight of all of his fangirls when he was forced to remove it. Fleur managed to avoid getting her skirt on fire this time, and as for Victor, half his eggs still got smashed. Madame Maxime gave Fleur 10, Cedric, Fred, and Harry a 9, and Victor 5. A little favoritism, but 1 point, or 2, given the second task, wasn't going to win or lose anyone the playoffs. Crouch gave Harry a 10, Crumb a 5, and everyone else a 9. Dumbledore gave everyone a 9 except for Victor, who got another 5. Bagman gave Harry a 10, Fleur, Cedric, and Fred a 7, and Crumb yet another 5. Karkaroff gave Victor a 10, and everyone else a 5. Lockhart gave Harry and Fred both a 10, Fleur and Cedric an 8, and Victor a 5. Luna, after some long, hard deliberation, gave Fred a 10 for creativity, Harry an 8 for showing off, Cedric and Fleur a 9 for a solid performance, and Crumb a 5. Vhy Vass at Alvis a 5. Crumb wondered. Harry shrugged. "You smashed half the eggs, you get half the points." "That sounds fair." "So that's Fleur with 57, Cedric with 56, Fred with 59, Harry with 61, and Crumb with 40, Hermione announced. "And I'm currently winning because I have 2 people with blatant favoritism on my side. Although it pains me that my own school representative voted against me," Harry said, shaking his head ruefully. "That's what you get for showing off," Luna said sternly. "Isn't it the point of the playoffs?" Harry demanded. "You are taking requests," Luna pointed out. Chapter 42. "Luna, wait up," Harry called to the blonde a few feet in front of him. Obligingly, she stopped to wait for him. "If this is about the second task, then I regret to inform you that you're clearly not obsessive enough to figure it out, and I couldn't tell you either way. I'm under oath, you see, all the judges are. Otherwise, what would be the point in not telling the contestants, since the various headmasters would tell their students anyway?" "Well, except for Dumbledore, but the tradition of judges making that oath dates back to before Dumbledore's time. That is old," Harry remarked. "And don't worry, I may not be obsessive enough to take the egg with my while bathing, but my scar was quite insistent on it, so I already know what the second task is." Cedric should figure it out sooner or later, and I saw the twins trying to play football after Dean explained it to them and kicked it into the lake, so I'm sure they've already got a plan, and I'm sure it will be epic. Or anticlimactic. Epic in its anticlimaticness. What about you? Luna asked him seriously. Do you know what you're going to do? Harry shrugged. I'll figure something out. And if not, I could always do what I did last time, but I did that with the first task, so... You were also in the Pentawizard playoffs before you went back in time? Luna inquired. Yeah, but it was called the Triwizard Tournament then, and Fred wasn't involved. Harry began before cutting himself off. He looked around to see if they were alone, and fortunately, they were. I forgot you figured out my secret. It's hardly a secret given that you're practically flaunting your future knowledge, Luna pointed out. But most people are tragically too close-minded to realize the truth. And you don't care? Harry asked, a little surprised. Not really, Luna answered honestly. Out of curiosity, how long ago did you get back and how old were you at the time? I was 23 when I got back, about a month before my first year, Harry replied. And did you come back to stop some terrible future? Luna pressed. Well, if I could stop Voldemort before he killed people I care about, that would be great, but honestly, no. Things worked out pretty well. I defeated Voldemort by the end of what was supposed to be my 7th year, and I accidentally went back in time 6 years later, Harry told her. I see, Luna said, sounding unsurprised. Then again, she never seemed surprised. I thought as much, as you didn't appear to be overly traumatized by the time I met you your 2nd year back. It's not like I don't miss them. Luna, I do, Harry assured her. But they're gone, and I don't see a way back. I came back through the veil in the Department of Mysteries, but I don't actually know anything about it or how it works, and neither does anybody else. And who's to say that if I went through it again, it wouldn't just kill me or send me to a 3rd dimension? I don't want to lose everything again. I understand, Luna said softly. Did Professor Black come back as well? Harry blinked. Yes. How did you dash? He broke out of Azkaban rather suddenly and unexpectedly, and he seemed a good deal more recovered than I thought someone would be from such a long-term stay in Azkaban when I first met him, Luna explained. So, does this change anything? Harry asked, a little nervous. He may not have really been close with Luna until the end of the war, and then she had gone off searching for mythical creatures and met Rolf, and hadn't moved back to England yet, and might not have really intended to get close to her in this time, but she really was the only one besides Sirius, who was in the same predicament really, who could keep up with him. Luna considered. Ginny and I are 13, Hermione is 15, and you're 26 or 27. Regardless of what Rita Skeeter's article tells you, you should put off dating until, at the very least, your 6th year. That way, if you go with someone your physical age, you won't be a pedophile, and if you go with someone who is around your mental age, they won't be tried as one, she said finally. Good advice, Harry nodded. To be honest, I'm really not even attracted to anyone my physical age right now because I look at them and I see a child. I've read Lolita, you know, and I do not intend to become Humbert. Luna nodded her approval. So, what did you want to talk about before we got sidetracked talking about the fact that you're from the future? Harry looked confused for a second. Oh, right. I wanted to know how you managed to become a judge. I mean, not like I don't have complete faith in you, but I don't get why some American headmistress you've never met would be willing to entrust you with representing her school. Well, that's quite a simple story, really, Luna began. The headmistress didn't even know about her school's technical participation until I informed her. She sent me a polite note back thanking me for informing her and then inquiring whether or not she would be required to do something. And what did you say? Harry asked. I told her that no, you wouldn't really need anything, but that she had a right to serve on the panel of judges. She replied that she was quite busy and had no real interest in judging the playoffs. I asked if there was anyone she would like to appoint as her proxy, and she asked why didn't I just do it since I, as the one who brought it to her attention in the first place. I'm not sure she even realized I was a student, and she certainly seemed to be rather disinterested in the whole affair, Luna concluded. Wow. So you just lucked into the position then? Harry clarified. Luna shrugged. Pretty much. Life works in interesting ways, doesn't it? It could have been anyone really, but I was the only one who thought to contact the headmistress. Well, congratulations. I'm sure you'll do amazing, Harry told her sincerely. Flattery will not make me stop docking you points for showing off, Harry, Luna said sternly. I don't know what you're talking about, Harry liked virtuously. But while we're on the subject of judging, how in the world did the twins get away with both of them competing? The Goblet selected Fred Weasley as a champion, and they were both Fred Weasley, Luna explained. I feel we should all be grateful that this isn't a public school and the name entered wasn't John Smith, or we would easily have half a dozen boys competing under one name. Even if that is technically true and without a doubt awesome, Harry began, the judges still had to approve it. There's no way Madame Maxime or, God forbid, Karkaroff would have allowed it. They voted against it, Luna conceded. As did Dumbledore. I think he's still a little sore at how easily you got past his age line, personally. There are 7 judges, though. 1 from each of the schools, Bagman and Crouch. I voted for the idea because the twins always work better together, and we're so far past the spirit of the rules that it's ridiculous. Lockhart voted for them because they represent his new school. Bagman said something about how he owed them money before also voting for them, and Crouch said that since there was nothing in the rules against it, and this was already extremely unconventional, he would allow it. That's 4-3 in favor of them being allowed to compete together, and so they did. So, the only reason that they got away with it was because 2 of them had personal reasons for doing it. Harry said, shaking his head ruefully. I might have known they'd find a way to turn Bagman's bet with them to their advantage. Indeed, they are fine champions, Luna said beaming. What about me? Harry demanded. Luna gave him a look of wide-eyed innocence. I've yet to see you in the school uniform, Harry. School uniform? Harry repeated, feeling slightly uneasy. Oh yes, Luna said earnestly. It's not that bad, really. You should see the Japanese school's outfits. They're practically just oversized yet skin-tight shirts. Harry had never expected to owe a Death Eater a debt of gratitude. Well, except Snape, but he was kind of on everyone's side, so that didn't really count. Now, however, he was finding himself strangely grateful to Crouch Jr. or whoever had taken his place for not making him a Japanese girl. Hey, Sirius, Harry greeted his surprisingly still employed godfather. Said Godfather gave him a puzzled glance. Did you want something, mister? Very funny, Sirius, Harry said, crossing his arms. That's Professor Black to you, Mr. Potter, Sirius said coldly. Harry rolled his eyes. You're feeling neglected. Maybe. I've been busy, Harry pointed out. What with the first task and the aftermath and all that? That's no excuse for abandoning your only family in the world, Sirius sniffed. What, so the Dursleys don't count? Harry asked rhetorically. No, they don't, Sirius replied. They lost all counting rights when they made you sleep in a cupboard. Dudley's not all that bad, Harry defended. Well, not after he got back from being in hiding the year Harry defeated Voldemort. Maybe not in the future, Sirius allowed, looking skeptical. And you haven't come to see me outside of class in practically forever. It was only a week, Sirius, Harry pointed out. Exactly. Sirius cried dramatically. Knowing you, you could have managed to die at least 4 times in that time. And that's not even counting the dragons. Speaking of, what did you think of the first task? Harry inquired, interested to hear what the only other person who knew how the task had originally gone, even if he was pretty sure he hadn't actually witnessed it, had to say. Well, aside from your blatant cheating dash, Sirius began. There are no rules about being sent back in time. Trust me, I checked, Harry objected. After all, I wouldn't want to inadvertently break a binding magical contract, now would I? I meant the dash, Sirius tried again. And summoning's kosher, too, even if it was a little audacious to have the broom in the stadium with me already, Harry interrupted again. Yeah, great, but again, not what I meant. I meant how you totally copied Crumb's spell. Even if it did end up working far better for you than it did for him, Sirius said thoughtfully. Me? Harry asked, shocked. Copy him? But I went first. And unless you seriously think someone at Taciturn as him would go around blabbing what his plan was, and in front of one of his fellow competitors, too, then there really would be no way for me to know. Are you accusing me of being psychic or something now? No. But the twins tell me that your scarf is pulling for a Hogwarts student victory, and so I wouldn't put it past it to let Crumb's plan slip. Sirius deadpanned. Harry winced.
Damn. Point.
Sirius grinned a bit smugly. Yes. Well, aside from that, I've got to say that I'm a bit disappointed. Harry groaned. Not you too. Honestly, if you start in on me about showing off like Luna did, then I am going to start hexing things. Sirius looked surprised.
Me?
Be upset about showing off? Never. Then what was the problem? Harry wondered. You did the exact same thing you did before. Sirius burst out. I mean, I'm willing to bet that you didn't take requests the first time or fly quite that elaborately, but it was the same basic plan. Fleur, Cedric, and Crumb used the exact same plan. Harry sulked. At least I had some variety. Fleur, Cedric, and Crumb haven't gone through all of this before, Sirius pointed out. You don't know that, Harry argued. Some of the people around me have done some very odd things. For instance, way back in first year, Fred slipped and said he saw Angelina in the mirror of Eriste and they date in the future. Neville got over his timidity rather quickly. Percy hasn't pulled away from his family as much. Dobby managed to get around all of Draco's incredibly specific orders to drive me from Hogwarts. Luna and I became friends a lot quicker. Lockhart hasn't been nearly as aggravating. Any or all of these people could very well have come back in time. Or they could just be responding to the situations they found themselves in. It's not unusual for a teenager to have a crush. Knowing Neville was your friend in the future meant you made more of an effort with him. Percy hasn't had a reason to split from his family yet, and you kept involving him. Dobby is a house elf, and I'm half convinced that all of them are as devious as Creature, if not as twisted, and your insanity and Luna's worldview complement each other nicely. As for Lockhart, well, instead of being someone who he had to fool and a ticket to free publicity, you became a kind of pupil, kindred fame seeker, and ticket to free publicity, Sirius tried to explain. Or, I suppose, they could have all just come back in time. Does it really matter? Harry shrugged. I guess not. Luna knows we're from the future, by the way. Sirius's eyes bulged. When did this happen? She told me on the train ride here, I think, Harry said vaguely. Sirius's eyes managed to get even bigger. And this is the first I'm hearing of it. Harry shrugged sheepishly. Sorry? How did she know? Sirius demanded. Apparently she doesn't believe in my psychic scar, even though she believes in everything else, Harry replied. Well, given everyone else believes in it, should you really be surprised? Sirius asked sensibly. Guess not, Harry admitted. And she didn't think you were traumatized enough and thought your random Halloween jailbreak was a bit bizarre. Sirius snorted. Wait, Luna Lovegood called me bizarre? For real? Not in so many words, Harry responded. She just said she didn't see why you would choose then of all times, and with no obvious reason. I didn't have any obvious reason for choosing to break out before your third year last time, either, Sirius pointed out. Well, I didn't actually know her when you broke out before, so who knows what she thought of the whole thing, Harry said. What was her reaction? Sirius wanted to know. She advised me not to be a pedophile, Harry answered, amused. Did she now? That reminds me, Sirius said with a smirk. What reminds you? Harry asked, wondering why he suddenly felt the urge to flee the scene. I read Rita Skeeter's article about you, Sirius said slowly. You did? Harry asked neutrally. Oh yes, Sirius nodded seriously. Quite interesting, to say the least. Apparently you have not one, not two, but 3 potential love interests. I was quite surprised to discover this as well, Harry replied. Sirius ignored him. Hermione, I can understand, as you always spend time with her. I thought Ginny hated you, but I suppose as the sister of your best friend who you seek out occasionally, that makes sense too. And given how well you and Luna get on, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Ginny doesn't hate me nearly as much anymore, Harry defended himself. In fact, I was planning on asking her to the old ball, and as long as I do it properly, I think she'd agree. Especially considering that she'll need a date to even attend it. Sirius gave him a long look. Are you sure that's such a good idea, Harry? Harry looked surprised. What do you mean? I always wished that I would have asked her before Neville did, but Since we didn't really know each other and she was still a recovering fangirl, it might have been awkward, but now we're friends, so what would be the problem? Well, Sirius explained patiently to his clueless godson, when boys and girls go to a ball together and have a good time, then they generally start dating. Ginny's 13, Harry protested. There's no way I could dash. I understand, Sirius assured him. But she won't. Unless you want to tell her. Harry envisioned what Ginny's reaction to finding out that not only was he a little less than twice as old as he was supposed to be, but that he mostly just acted the way he did out of boredom. You know what? Maybe I'll ask Luna. I don't think she attended last time, because if she had, I have no doubt that even though I had no idea who she was, her outfit would have made an impression. Besides, since we just had that anti-Lolita talk, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to help out. Chapter 43. Hey Luna, you know about the old ball coming up, right? Harry asked. Seeing as I'm a judge, it would be very remiss of me not to know, Luna responded.
Right.
Well, as a champion, I'm kind of required to go. I'm not actually sure what would happen if I refused to go, but I'm sure my illustrious guardian would get a kick out of forcing me to attend, so I kind of have no choice. Bearing in mind that I don't want to go with anyone and give them the impression that I want to date them, forcing me to reject them and make it much harder should I ever decide that I do want to date them, I need your help, Harry said quickly. Luna raised an eyebrow. My help with what, exactly? Finding a way to make sure whoever you want to go with really understands that it's just as friends? Lots of people say they understand but really want more, and going with someone you don't know as just friends never works out, so you could probably use the help. True, Harry acknowledged. There are only two people I can think of who would really get that I don't want to date them right now. One would be Hermione, of course, but I can't ask her. Why not?
Luna asked.
You would have a lot of fun with her if she doesn't decide to try and kill you too many times. I know, Harry admitted. But now's around the time that Ron realizes he has a crush on her, and I do not want to get in the middle of that. Whether they still end up together or not, it's just a bad situation. And I don't think he ever really got over his hatred of Victor. Crumb, Luna asked. What did he do? He took Hermione to the old ball the first time, Harry explained. Then Ron asked like a week before the event. He wasn't very tactful either. Harry winced. I believe he asked me if I had a date, mentioned he had none either, then said one of us could go with Hermione, because she obviously had no date, and refused to believe her when she said she did. And she ended up going with one of the champions, Luna finished.
Wow.
Ronald has no tact sometimes. He does grow out of that, right? Mostly. So, who is the other girl? Luna asked curiously. You, actually, Harry told her. We could probably have just as much fun as Hermione and I, and you understand my situation, so you know why my choices of date are extremely limited. Can I ask you to the old balls? You're asking me for my permission to ask me to the dance? Luna sounded amused. Well, yeah. I wouldn't want to get turned down in front of everybody. It would be very embarrassing, and there are a good 3 or 4 people who seem to carry cameras around with them everywhere, Harry replied with a wry grin. You don't have to ask in front of everyone, you know, Luna pointed out. I know, Harry conceded. But I plan on doing it anyway. Hey, since you're a judge and I'm a champion, would we ever be allowed to go together? Luna considered the question. I don't actually think there are any rules against it, she decided. If for no other reason, that usually judges are in their late 30s at the very least, and the students are no more than 17 or 18. One could argue that that would mean I would be favoring you, especially as representative of your school, but I did give you the lowest score I gave anyone save Crumb, and if you show off again for the second task, then I'll probably have to do that again, so people really won't be accusing me of that with any alacrity. That's good, Harry said, sounding relieved that he wouldn't have a pissed off for reasons he can't explain Ron on his hands. So will you let me ask you? Why not? Luna said. So the old ball's coming up, Harry said one day when he, Ron, and Neville were alone in their dormitory. It was unsubtle as hell, but hinting about it would do no good, especially as it hadn't been announced yet. The what? Ron asked blankly. They're having some sort of dance? Indeed, Harry nodded. 4th years and up are allowed to go, possibly because of me. It's during Christmas break, and anyone younger can only go if they're a date. I am required to go because of my status as champion, but you guys aren't. Are you planning on attending? My gran would kill me if I didn't, Neville said mournfully. All those years she made me take dancing lessons, she stopped after I got into Hogwarts though. I was never very good at them. Thankfully, I was much less clumsy when she abruptly started them up again over the summer. I guess she knew I would need the practice for the ball. After you saved me from the horrors of the moldy dress? Absolutely, Ron declared. Besides, how lame would it be to have to just sit in the common room with all the little kids and the people who couldn't get dates? You realize that the people who are only a year younger than you, and in many cases, less that will be not able to attend, right? Neville asked tentatively. Right, Ginny's age, Ron confirmed. Little kids, in other words. She hears you say that. She's hexing you, Harry warned him. I'm planning on using you as a human shield, Ron informed him casually. Like hell, Harry grumbled. So, why do you ask about our attendance of a ball that hasn't even been announced yet? Neville asked curiously. Because I don't want to be the guy who angst about who we want to ask for weeks, finally work up the nerve to ask, find out our dream date is going with a fellow champion, and end up with a classmate of mine who only agrees because I'm a champion, and who I just end up ignoring her to stare at my crush and spy on other people the whole night, Harry declared. Speaking from experience? Neville asked sympathetically. Sadly, yes, Harry nodded. So, do you have any idea who you're asking yet? Nope, Ron said. Not really, Neville agreed. But then, we just found out about the ball itself 5 minutes ago. That's no excuse, Harry said sternly. In fact, I already asked Luna if I could ask her, and she said sure. Well, that's not really surprising, Ron said. She's a judge, so she would know. Are you allowed to go with her, though? Given that? Harry shrugged. If it's not in the rules, why not? And Ron, I recommend you ask Hermione. Huh? Ron looked puzzled. Why? Because you have a crush on her, Neville told him bluntly. What? Ron sputtered. I do not. Yes, you do, Harry told him. You just haven't realized it yet. So let me get this straight. You think I have a crush on Hermione and I haven't noticed it? Ron asked incredulously. How thick do you think I am? When it comes to matters of the heart, I have no faith in you, Harry told him bluntly. Besides, remember last year when Professor Trelawney told Lavender to beware a red-headed man? Vaguely, Ron confirmed. Well, my scar informs me that if you don't ask Hermione right away, Victor Crumb will, and she'll accept, and you'll be forced to go with Lavender, and you'll both have a miserable time until she ditches you for a boy from Beauxbatons because you've ignored her to gripe about Hermione fraternizing with the enemy all night, Harry lied. Well, the story was true, but Ron would be going with Padma, not Lavender, as her problem with Ron was from 6th year. So you want me to ask Hermione? Ron said, still sounding skeptical. Otherwise international Quidditch sensation and teenage heartthrob Victor Crumb will. He's been sighted haunting the library and staring at Hermione quite a bit the past few weeks, Neville offered. Not that she's noticed, of course. She's just annoyed that his fangirls followed him in. I'll think about it, Ron agreed, resolving to discover whether or not he really had top-secret feelings for his best female friend that he had never noticed, but apparently his other two best friends had. What about you, Neville? Harry asked. You could always ask Hannah. Abbott? Neville looked surprised. She's dating Ernie. Really?
Harry was also surprised.
Still, he supposed he really didn't pay enough attention to them that it was unexpected for him not to know that. Hell, he paid even less attention to them before coming back, so they might have even been dating around that time. So, who do you want to go with? I think he should ask Ginny. Ron spoke up unexpectedly. Really? Neville's eyebrows disappeared into his hairline. I thought you'd be against anyone taking her to a date-like function such as this. Well, I am, Ron conceded. Seeing as how she's my baby sister, and all dash. She's less than a year and a half younger than you, Harry interrupted. But I suppose you two are really the only people I would trust not to take advantage of her, and since Harry's going with Luna, it will have to be you, Ron said seriously. Because I know she has those dress robes for a reason, and won't be able to go unless a guy asks her. Neville considered. She's a friend of mine and won't be able to go without an escort, and I really don't want to end up by myself, so why not? Okay, now that that's settled, Harry said, trying to ignore the small spark of jealousy that Neville would once again be accompanying Ginny to the ball. After all, they'd gone together last time, and nothing had come of that, but Neville was a lot more confident a lot earlier now, so best not worry about that. Let's talk about how we're going to ask them. The day McGonagall announced the Yule Ball to their Transfiguration class, Harry, Ron, and Neville put their plan into action. Ron still wouldn't admit to having a thing for Hermione, but did, when pressed, turn a bit red and remark that she wasn't so bad, which they actually considered to be progress. At dinner that night, Harry started things off by letting a female crumple-horned snorkack with a paper hat on it loose and casting a spell to point it in Luna's direction. The little pig-like creature snorted loudly as it dashed across the Great Hall to the Ravenclaw table and caught everyone's attention. Luna, serene as ever, simply plucked the not-so-mythical-anymore creature up and took off the hat. I would discover a mythical creature for you. Would you please attend the Yule Ball with me? Luna read off. Certainly, Harry. I'm thinking about calling this one Norberta. The typical response of applause and catcalls died down quickly when Neville stood up next. He walked over to Ginny, who was a few seats down from him, and handed her a large box of Honeyduke's finest chocolate. Even if you say no, you can still keep the candy, but please say you'll go to the Yule Ball with me. Ginny read the note taped to the box. She looked up with a smile. Of course. That applause was also cut off as Hedwig flew in carrying a bouquet of roses and a handwritten card and landed in front of Hermione. Hermione looked to Harry in confusion before reaching for the note. Hermione, it might have taken me a while, but it's recently come to my attention that you are, in fact, a girl and a pretty great one, too. Will you go to the Yule Ball with me? She read, sounding shocked. She opened and closed her mouth a few times.
Well,
Ron asked, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. Harry kicked her. Yes, she finally said, still unable to believe he'd actually asked her. She had kind of thought he might like her, but acknowledging it, well, that was a bit more than she'd expected of him. The students hesitated for a few moments in case someone else wanted to take that opportunity to ask someone to the Yule Ball. When no one did, the applause became thunderous and girls swarmed in on the only three with dates to press for details. Harry managed to hear Draco's annoyance above the clapping, however. Way to go, Potter. Now we've got to put some thought into this. Harry remembered how awkward the asking could have gone. Ron didn't even know who Padma was when Parvati set them up, and felt no sympathy. Chapter 44. The boys of the castle were quite irritated with Harry for the next few weeks, as they felt they now had to live up to his standards in asking girls to the Yule Ball. Of course, Ron and Neville had also added to the bar set, but did anyone care about that? No, they all just decided to blame Harry. It actually became somewhat of a competition to see who could come up with the most attention-grabbing proposal, and hardly a public gathering went by without at least someone trying to secure their date. Naturally, Harry was very pleased with the results. The day of the Yule Ball, there was hardly a girl in sight after noon. While Ron wondered aloud what they could possibly be doing that took so long to get ready, Harry just thanked God that he wasn't expected to put hours of preparation into his appearance, because in all honesty, he probably wouldn't have bothered if he was. When the time came to go down to the dance itself, Harry spotted Luna standing at the bottom of the staircase. He supposed she was waiting for him, but she seemed quite engrossed in a discussion with the portrait next to her. Her dress also appeared to be on fire. Hey, Luna, Harry greeted her. Hello, Harry. You look very nice. Luna returned the greeting. Thank you. Is your dress supposed to be like that? Harry asked a little uncertainly. Luna looked down to see if anything was amiss with her outfit. You mean the flames? Yes, it is. You don't like it? Oh no, I do, Harry assured her. I just wasn't sure if it was supposed to be like that, and I would have felt really stupid if I complimented you on it, and it turned out it wasn't intentional. Luna looked amused. I think even I would notice if my dress was on fire, and it wasn't supposed to be, Harry. You never know, Harry said defensively. I suppose it is possible that I somehow failed to notice a flame-freezing charm, Luna agreed pleasantly. Although the lack of a tickling sensation would normally preclude that possibility. Then again, I've never been very ticklish. It could happen, Harry insisted. Shall we go? Champions over here, McGonagall called at that moment. I think that's a yes, Luna decided. Do you think she means the dates as well? Harry shrugged.
Probably.
They really should be more clear, though. Fleur Delacour had elected to go with Roger Davies again, most likely because Cedric, who Harry had heard had turned her down again, and no one could believe he would actually do that even though he already had a girlfriend, was still with Cho. Harry saw how happy she looked and how it had taken years and Marietta literally dragging her to a therapist. Muggle, because there weren't any wizarding ones, so the story had to be slightly edited before she could be said she had come to terms with Cedric's death and hoped she wouldn't have to go through that again. She really was a nice girl, if a bit clingy and teary, but that was understandable. Victor, having not been able to even ask Hermione given how public Ron's asking and her acceptance had been, was with Parvati in a strange twist of fate. With any luck, he'd be more attentive than Harry had been. Then again, Ron was probably the only person who hadn't managed that feat, and God knows if he did it again, Hermione would hex him. Fred had once again decided to go with Angelina, and George was there with Katie. Predictably, Luna's flames drew a lot of attention, but no one really wanted to ask. Well, not until Draco showed up. Potter, your date's on fire, the blonde informed him imperiously. And your date isn't, Harry replied. Hello, Pansy. Pansy nodded at him, but didn't say anything. Does this mean you're speaking to me again?
Harry asked.
Draco hadn't said a word to him since complaining that he was going to have to put some effort into the asking aspect of the old ball, as he was annoyed by how much trouble he was going to have to go through because, as a Malfoy, he couldn't possibly let himself be seen as inferior. Pansy seemed to appreciate the half a dozen flying horses he'd rented out, however. Draco shrugged. It's been 3 weeks. I was actually going to hold out until New Year's, but my concern for the well-being of one of my fellow students spurred me to speak to you earlier than I'd planned. Harry snorted. I'm sure that's exactly it. Line up with your partner and follow me, McGonagall instructed once most of the attendees were in the Great Hall. When they did, everyone applauded their entrance. Harry just ignored it and headed to the large round table at the top of the hall. The judges were already there. Bagman, Madame Maxime, Dumbledore, Karkaroff, Lockhart, Crouch, and Percy Weasley. What are you doing here? Harry asked, surprised. As Luna is here in an unofficial capacity as your date, she asked me to fill in as representative of Salem, Percy explained. And since I have 2 siblings competing, I decided it wouldn't be a bad idea. About that. Fred looked decidedly nervous. Percy, how angry is Mum about the whole playoff thing? Harry killed Mum's howler, so we haven't heard anything since being chosen, George added. Percy seemed to consider the question. You might not want to go home for Easter. That bad, huh? Fred winced. This is so not fair, George complained. George didn't even get picked. No, Percy acknowledged. But do you honestly think anyone believes that if Fred entered, you didn't as well? Percy asked, once again displaying his uncanny ability to tell the twins apart. And even if she did believe that, you legally changed your name in order to compete. Yeah, well, George said lamely. Interesting dress, Percy commented. Why, thank you, Luna beamed. So tell me, you work for Mr. Crouch, right? He mentioned you at one of our judge meetings. Percy immediately brightened and began talking animatedly with Luna about the ministry. Harry idly wondered how soon it would be before the Rotfong conspiracy would come up. Harry looked over to see Fleur criticizing the decorations to Roger Davies, who would probably be offended if he weren't so dazzled. We'd ave none of this ugly armor in Z, alls and if a poltergeist even entered into Beau's batons, you would be expelled like that. Poltergeists build character, Harry spoke up. Build characters? Fleur repeated skeptically. Jai are a menace. True, Harry agreed. A character-building menace. I would not attend a school with a poltergeist if you paid me, Fleur declared. Considering you're French, would you really be willing to attend Hogwarts either way? Harry asked rhetorically. Fleur's eyes narrowed. And just what is that supposed to mean? That just because I am French, I am not good enough for your Hogwarts? I didn't say that, Harry tried to placate her. But England and France have a rather adversarial relationship, don't you think? And even if Hogwarts isn't technically in England, most of the students and staff are English. I suppose you are correct, Fleur conceded, looking as though the admission pained her. And tacky decorating do not help either. But Jeanne, what can you expect from ZE English? Harry shrugged. Our headmaster's always been more concerned with playing politics and keeping up to date on what's going on in the castle than interior decorating. Keeping an eye on what goes on in Castle. Fleur repeated. How much time could that possibly take? Harry snorted.
You'd be surprised.
In fact, apart from the introduction of a bunch of foreign students, this year hasn't been too different than the previous ones. Fleur raised an eyebrow elegantly. What could you possibly do that even compares to facing down a dragon? Harry shrugged. 2 years ago, I slew a basilisk. Yes. What an exciting tale that was. Lockhart promptly inserted himself into the conversation. You can read all about it in my recent book, Baiting the Basilisk. So, how are Victor's fame lessons going? Harry inquired politely. I tried asking him, but he just said that he'd never thought of anything the way you did, which I guess means he's learning a lot, but not very helpful as far as his progress goes. Oh, I'm so proud, Lockhart beamed. 2 weeks ago, he managed to make it to class on time for the first time since arriving at Hogwarts. Harry could hardly believe it. Did he dash? He did, Lockhart confirmed. Did what? Roger asked absently, still staring at Fleur, who was beginning to look a little annoyed at his lack of both subtlety and blinking. He started carrying around signed pictures of him, Lockhart explained. Mr. Davies, correct? Roger nodded, eyes never leaving Fleur. Harry knew Roger, kind of, and he really wasn't that creepy and stalkerish on a regular basis. Being part Vila, while it may frequently get you what you want, especially with men, lesbians, and the bisexual, had to get annoying after a while. No wonder she went with the relatively immune Bill Weasley. And that helps? Fleur asked, giving out Z-signed pictures to the crowds of adoring fans that follow him everywhere. Oh yes, Lockhart nodded. Although in your case there's magic involved, so it may not prove as effective. It might be worth a try, however. Fleur nodded, looking thoughtful. After the food was gone, Dumbledore cleared the tables away and conjured up a set for the Weird Sisters. Harry smiled a little nostalgically. He remembered back when they'd been popular, before the seductive seers had struck it big a year or so after Voldemort had been vanquished. Harry held out his hand to his date, who had actually managed to make Percy laugh a few times during dinner. Wonders might never cease, but he was pretty sure he didn't want to know. Shall we dance? As this is the Champions' Dance, and everyone will be staring at us expectantly anyway, we might as well, Luna consented, taking his hand and moving out onto the dance floor. Since when do you care what other people think? Harry teased. Who's to say I do? Luna retorted. I just feel like dancing, and I happen to like this song. It's Norberta's favorite, you know? Crumpled horn snorkax like the Weird Sisters? Harry asked, raising his eyebrows. Only Norberta, Luna explained. Norbert likes the Beatles, Beethoven, and Cyndi Lauper. Is that so? Harry asked, smiling. His taste is kind of eclectic, Luna informed him. But he doesn't like the Weird Sisters? Harry repeated. Luna shook her head. He refuses to listen to anything that's insanely popular right now. Apparently, it takes time to determine the lasting power of a group. He's pretty cynical for a mythical creature, Harry remarked. Luna laughed. As an endangered species not certain of his own lasting power, it makes sense he would be concerned about such things. A few songs later, Luna and Harry decided to take a break and went over to where Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Ginny were sitting, talking. Greetings, various friends and acquaintances, Harry waved as he sat down at their table. Oh, I get it. I'm the acquaintance, right?
Ginny asked.
Because I'm not part of your exclusive quartet? It's not that exclusive, Harry replied. Neville got in. Yeah, your first year, Ginny pointed out. That's just what you get for being a year and a half younger than me, Ron said solemnly. Ginny whacked her brother on the arm. Prat. Actually, he said friends and acquaintances, Neville noted. Both of those were plural. Since Luna was already with him when he greeted us, He must not consider another one of us besides Ginny a friend. Why can't you all just be both my friends and associates? Harry asked. Since I am both acquainted with you and your friend, you could, Hermione told him. If one of the definitions for acquaintance wasn't not a close friend, and while Ginny could count as that, we three are supposed to be your best friends. Just for that I think I'm nominating you as my acquaintance, Harry sniffed. Excuse me while I go cry, she responded dryly. Seriously, Hermione, when did you memorize a dictionary? Ron teased. I haven't memorized one, Hermione began, looking a little embarrassed. Just any of the words I needed to look up at some point. Why do my friends hate me? Harry wondered aloud. Because you go out of your way to make their lives more complicated? Luna suggested. You say that like it's a bad thing, Harry muttered. I think most people could use a little more complications in their life, Luna assured him. But most people, sadly, are sheep. We've been over this. Harry nodded his agreement. So, how has the dance been going for you guys? Hermione eyed her date. Ron doesn't actually know how to dance, but I've read a few books on the subject and practiced with Ginny, so we're dealing. My feet have not been stepped on once, Ginny announced happily. That's setting the bar kind of low, don't you think? Neville asked her. Ginny shrugged. I had to help teach Hermione, and while she's decent now, my poor feet, it wasn't that bad. Hermione flushed. I'm just glad that Ron couldn't be bothered to ask his little sister for help, or I would probably never be able to walk again, Ginny confided. Although now at least Hermione can feel my pain. I'm not that bad, Ron insisted. But tell me, why is Percy here? He's filling in for me tonight, as judge since I came with Harry, Luna replied promptly. We had a very nice conversation over dinner. Ron looked rather gobsmacked.
About what?
Don't tell me you listened to his reports about cauldron bottom thickness the whole time. No, actually he's been recently promoted, Luna answered. You should probably talk more if you had to hear that from me, by the way. We talked a little about the ministry. He had some very interesting theories, particular regarding the Rotfong conspiracy. The what? Ron asked blankly. It's a conspiracy theory that the Aurors and other top ministry officials are plotting to bring down the ministry through a combination of dark magic and gum disease, Hermione explained. Everyone stared at her incredulously. What? She snapped. Luna told me the minute she found out my parents were dentists. It would be quite ingenious to involve muggles in the conspiracy to throw us off the trail, Luna said seriously. They don't even have to be fully aware of all the details to preserve the masquerade. Masquerade. This time Neville was the one confused. You know, where we all of us with magic pretend that we don't exist, and those without magic who know about us all ignore our existence, Luna clarified.
Ah, that, Harry said.
Ron looked gobsmacked. Percy has a sense of humor? After the dance was over, Harry and Luna ran into Cho and Cedric on their way back to the Ravenclaw common room. Listen, Harry, got a minute? Cedric asked. I have several, Harry replied. Why? I have to talk to you about the playoffs. Privately, Cedric said, glancing at Luna pointedly. Luna nodded obligingly. Yes, if you guys are going to cheat, then I probably should not be here for this, even if I'm not here in my official capacity. Cedric looked dismayed. We're not going to cheat, I just dash. The less I hear, the better, Luna interrupted. Come on, Cho. Let's figure out what we're going to tell everyone else about being the date of a champion, since I'm sure Roger didn't get anything more than eye candy out of the experience. Once the two girls were out of hearing distance, Cedric turned to Harry. So, you know the second task, right? I had heard rumor of such an event, Harry confirmed. Right, of course, Cedric said, shaking his head. What I mean to say is, do you know anything about it? Harry was nearly positive that he knew more about it than Cedric did, but unless he was very much mistaken, Cedric was trying to repay him. The bottled banshee shrieking is supposed to be some sort of clue, Harry reported. When he first opened the eggs, George said it sounded like Percy singing and suggested that the task might involve attacking him in the shower. I think it's kind of disturbing his first thought was Percy showering, but then what do I know? I'm an orphan. Didn't you live with family, though? Cedric asked. I did, Harry acknowledged. Before Sirius came back from Majorca. but the thought of Dudley showering is enough to make me feel violently ill. I'll just take your word for that, Cedric decided. So, you have no idea how to solve the clue? None at all, Harry lied. Cedric was trying to do something nice here, and he had very much appreciated it last time. Your scar doesn't have any advice? Cedric pressed. Harry shrugged. It knows I'm planning on doing any work on this off until the week before. You can still put this off, but I felt I should tell you now. Take a bath with it, Cedric advised. That might help you think. So now we're on the subject of me bathing, Harry remarked. What is it with all the water imagery? I don't know, Cedric said neutrally. That is strange, though. Really something to think about. I'm not quite sure what you mean by telling me to take a bath with the egg, but I'm sure something will occur to me. Thank you, Harry said sincerely. Cedric just nodded and turned to go. Why tell me? Harry asked suddenly. Why? Cedric looked genuinely puzzled. Well, you helped me with the first task, didn't you? I honestly don't know what I would have done if I'd been flying blind in there, and you all had a plan. He paused. Even if Crumbs wasn't the most well thought out, it was just the right thing to do. Harry smiled. You're a good guy, Cedric. Now again, graveyards. He was a pretty good sport, too. Run like hell. Chapter 45. Hey guys, Colin Creevy said, clearing his throat loudly. The people in the Gryffindor common room turned to look at him expectantly. I need Lee Jordan and one of Harry's friends to go see Professor McGonagall. One of Harry's friends? Hermione repeated. She didn't say which? Colin shrugged. I don't think it matters. Since she just needed someone and the second task is tomorrow, maybe it's for that. The egg did say something about a treasure, Harry agreed. So, which of you wants to be my treasures? Not it, Neville called immediately. I know Dumbledore would never intentionally let anything happen to us, but things tend to go wrong whenever you're involved. You say, wrong, I say more interesting, Harry demurred. What about you two? He asked his other two close Gryffindor friends. You're not taking this task nearly seriously enough for me to put my life in your hands, Hermione said frankly. Sorry, mate, Ron apologized. I really want to watch the task, and these things are always less enjoyable to witness when you actually take part in it. So what am I supposed to do? Harry demanded. Luna can't do it because she's a judge, and my three best friends can't be bothered. I'll do it, Ginny offered. Harry turned to her, surprised. Really? But I thought you didn't think much of my hero abilities. Ginny gave him a small smile. I've always had faith in your saving people abilities. I just wish you'd be more heroic about it and not keep copping out. Harry shrugged. Yeah, well, what works works, you know? Ginny rolled her eyes. One day you'll do something epic. You'll simply have no other choice. Probably, Harry agreed. But not until I absolutely have to. Hey Ron, shouldn't you be more concerned that Ginny's going to risk her life for Harry? Neville asked. Why should I be? Ron countered. Harry's already made it clear that he's not looking to date right now, so he can spend more time on his insanity. Most people would say studies, Hermione noted. Yeah, but this is Harry, so no one would believe him, Ron pointed out. True, but what I actually meant was Harry still doesn't seem to be taking this very seriously, so shouldn't you be worried about your sister's safety, if not necessarily her virtue? Neville questioned. I'm not the one who doesn't have faith in Harry's saving people thing, Ron responded. That's you and Hermione. Tell you what, if it makes you feel any better, Neville, I'll give Ginny my favorite good luck rock, Harry offered, pulling an ordinary-looking brown rock out of his pocket. You really don't have to, Ginny told him. I know, but I want to. Besides, this way you know at the very least I'll be trying to get my rock back, Harry said seriously. Please take it, Ginny sighed. Fine. She took the rock from Harry's outstretched hand and slipped it into her own pocket. Excellent, Harry beamed. Keep it with you during the task. You never know when something might go horribly wrong, and you'll need a little extra luck. What about you, Lee? Fred asked. Are you going to refuse to go because we're not being serious enough? George continued. Lee scoffed. Are you kidding me? If you were acting serious, I'd start to worry. Besides, you guys really won the prize money for your store, so I think I'm reasonably safe. One thing, though. What? Fred asked. If you turn me into a canary during the course of rescuing me, then we will no longer be speaking, Lee warned. As if we would be so unoriginal, George replied, sounding mildly affronted. Good, Lee said vehemently before turning to Ginny. Now, shall we go? All right, Harry? Bagman whispered right before the second task was to begin. Know what you're going to do? He sounded doubtful, and Harry didn't blame him. Unlike all of the other contestants who were dressed in swimming wear, except for George, but he only half counted as a contestant anyway, Harry was sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Well, it was cold, so why wear less clothing than he needed to? Would it make a difference if I didn't? Harry asked innocently. Well, no. Technically, Bagman said, looking deeply uneasy. But just the same, I dash. Don't worry, I have a plan, Harry promised. It wouldn't do to look stupid in front of the press, he added, indicating Rita Skeeter and her photographer, who were sitting near the front of the bleachers. Looking far more relieved than he should have. Even if Harry knew why, the man couldn't act to save his life. Bagman pointed his wand at his throat and muttered a quick, sonorous, well, all our champions are ready for the second task, which will start on my whistle. They have precisely an hour to recover what has been taken from them. On the count of 3, then. 1, 2, 3. Fred popped something into his mouth while Fleur and Cedric cast what appeared to be bubblehead charms on themselves while Victor transfigured his head into something rather shark-like, and then the four of them quickly took to the water. Aren't you going to go in as well? George asked conversationally, pulling a mirror out of his pocket and glancing at it. Aren't you? Harry shot back. George shook his head. Nah, George has this part covered. I'm just here as moral support until he reaches Lee. What about you, though? You don't have anyone else to go down to get your hostage, and, perfectly safe or not, that is my little sister you're not trying to rescue, after all. If she heard you implying she needed saving, she would probably hex you, Harry pointed out. I know, George agreed. But seeing as how she's currently at the bottom of the lake and probably unconscious, I think I'm relatively safe. For now, Harry agreed. But not for long. Sure enough, not 5 minutes later, a dripping wet and barely conscious Ginny appeared a few feet away from Harry. What did you do? George demanded. Not only did you not go down there yourself, but you didn't even take your wand out. How is she up here? Harry smirked. I would tell you, but then dash. You'd have to kill me? George supplied. Harry shook his head. No. That's a little drastic, but I would be very put out if I had to tell you, and then explain it to the judges later. Speaking of, they seem to be waving you over, George noted. Harry glanced at the judges, who did appear to be very keen on speaking with him.
I'll go.
See what they want after checking on Ginny. Walking over to his hostage, Harry handed her a towel. That wasn't so bad, was it? How long did it take you to get to me? Ginny asked, accepting the proffered towel gratefully. And why aren't you wet? If you have a spell to dry people off, the least you could do is use it on me since I was the only one who was actually willing to put my life in your hands. Harry rolled his eyes. You would have been fine, it only took 10 minutes because I, as you probably expected, totally used a cop-out. I didn't even go in the water. If you want to know what I did, you can come with me when I explain it to the judges. All right, Ginny agreed, following him over to where the judges were seated. Well done, Harry. You got your hostage back in a little over 10 minutes. Bagman congratulated him, beaming. Yes, it was very impressive, Crouch concurred diplomatically. But seeing as how you did not venture into the water, nor take out your wand at all, we would ask you to explain your actions so we can decide whether or not what you did is within the rules or not. Well, yesterday Colin came to my friends and I and said that one of them needed to go see Professor McGonagall. They figured it must be for today, and Ron, Hermione, and Neville either didn't think I was taking this seriously enough for them to put themselves in any danger, or wanted to watch the task, so they refused, and Ginny graciously agreed to go in place of them, Harry explained. I was wondering why Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, or Mr. Longbottom were not the hostage, as you spend the most time with them, Dumbledore remarked. Harry shrugged. If Colin had said it had to be one of them, then I'm sure one of them would have agreed to do it eventually, but since you weren't more specific, another friend of mine stepped forward instead. So, I'm a friend now, Ginny murmured. I was just an acquaintance a couple of weeks ago. Well, you agreed to be my hostage when none of my so-called best friends could be bothered, Harry pointed out. If there was still any doubt, that firmly cements your friend status. Good to know, Ginny told him. I think it's quite telling when one's own closest friends do not have enough faith in him to even agree to participate in a task where Albus Dumbledore himself is on hand to make sure that nothing goes wrong, Karkaroff remarked idly. Truly, yes, rather unusual, especially considering Augie did not even know what the task was, Madame Maxime agreed. But never mind that. Tell us what you did. I gave Ginny a good luck rock as my horribly unsupportive friends were concerned I would somehow mess up rescuing her, and as luck would have it, that rock turned out to be a time-activated portkey, Harry continued. Go figure, huh? Now, that's how you get these things done, Lockhart said approvingly. I don't know, Luna said slowly. I'll have to give him points for creativity, but take away point for a lack of overall effort. Surely this is cheating, Karkaroff protested. He used a bloody portkey. There's nothing in the rulebooks against portkeys, Crouch replied. And, trust me, I would know. Karkaroff looked like he wanted to say something else, but he stopped when he saw George walk purposely towards the edge of the water. He pointed his wand at the lake and shouted, Accio, Fred Weasley. "I cannot summon thee, hostage," Madame Maxime scoffed. Silly boy. That's the name of the champion, Dumbledore corrected her, his eyes trained on the water. For a minute, it seemed like nothing was happening. Then Fred shot out of the water and crashed into his brother. He was holding Lee Jordan. Harry ran over to them. What did you do? Madame Maxime said you couldn't summon your hostages, and I figured that that would be the case, but even if it wasn't, that would be a little too much of a cop-out for even me. You can't, George agreed as Fred started gasping for air and dived back into the water. But George ate some gillyweed, swam down to where the hostages were, freely, and then tapped on a two-way mirror we have until he got my attention. Once that happened, I summoned him, and so even though Lee couldn't be summoned, he was pulled along for the ride. Of course, gillyweed lasts an hour or so George is stuck in the lake until then. Oh, give it up, Harry told him. I know that you're really George. No, I'm not, George denied. Then why did you summon Fred Weasley? Harry challenged, knowing he had won. Because if I didn't, Karkaroff would be on our case again about how the two of us competing is cheating or something stupid like that, and he legally changed his name. So, he is Fred Weasley, George countered. Touché, Harry said at last. An hour later, and all the champions had returned with their hostages. Cedric returned in the middle of George's victory dance after time had been called, and Fred's gillyweed had worn off at that time as well, so he had emerged from the lake with Cedric and Cho. Fleur made it back 10 minutes after Cedric did, and Victor arrived 15 minutes after that with Parvati. Harry wondered at Fleur's success, as he vaguely recalled that he had initially rescued Gabrielle as she had been forced to turn back, but he supposed that just because she had been attacked or whatever originally was no reason for the exact same thing to have happened a second time. The scores were posted as Harry Potter 8, 5, 10, 10, 10, 7, 10. Fred Weasley's 8, 5, 10, 10, 9, 10, 10. Cedric Diggory 7, 5, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. Fleur Delacour 9, 5, 8, 9, 8, 8, 7. Victor Crumb 6, 10, 7, 8, 8, 8, 8. From Madame Maxime, Karkaroff, Dumbledore, Crouch, Bagman, Luna, and Lockhart, respectively. That brought the point totals up to 121 for Harry, 121 for Fred, 113 for Cedric, 111 for Fleur, and 95 for Victor. No one was as blatant about their biases as Karkaroff, but Harry got the feeling that only Dumbledore and possibly Crouch had been fair. Luna wasn't exactly trying to cheat, he was sure, but since he and the twins were the only ones to fall within the 1-hour time limit, shouldn't they get the highest scores by default? Clearly, Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, and Luna did not think so. So, Victor, Harry said to him. Why Parvati? I mean, no offense to her. She's great, but I know that you had liked Hermione before Ron asked her to the old ball, so you can't really have known Parvati for longer than 3 months. And even if you had, look at Fleur. She went to the ball with Roger Davies, and even though they didn't have the best time, I don't think, or at least she didn't, her treasure didn't even have to be a fellow student, as they were willing to import her hostage from France. True, Victor agreed. But I am not particularly close with any of the other members of the Durmstrang delegation, and my friends and family did not particularly want to make the trip from either Durmstrang or Bulgaria. That makes sense, Harry nodded. France is right across the channel from Great Britain, after all. It's a much shorter trip. I was right. It was so much better watching the task than having to be unconscious underwater in February, Ron announced as he, Hermione, and Neville finally made their way to Harry. Although we really couldn't see much until the champions were done. And I was right about Harry not taking this seriously, Hermione noted. I took it plenty seriously, Harry insisted. And what's more, I finished the task in 10 minutes. But if the portkey hadn't worked, would you have had a backup plan? Neville asked seriously. Well, no, Harry admitted. I did practice with creating portkeys, though. And you wonder why we didn't want to do this, Hermione said, shaking her head at him. At least Ginny still likes me, Harry said, crossing his arms. I was bribed with chocolate, Ginny said by way of explanation as she unwrapped another Hershey bar. I've never tried Muggle candy before. You're missing out, Hermione told her. Muggle candy might not be as exciting as its wizarding counterpart, but at least you'll never have it try and escape, turn you into a bird, or taste like vomit. Although, I'll be honest, I wouldn't have picked Hershey's to give her for her first time trying Muggle candy, Harry. Why not? Harry asked. Hershey's is iconic. Hermione gave him an unimpressed look. Maybe in America. But we're in America, Harry protested. Everyone stared at him. Want to try that again? Neville asked. Harry shrugged shamelessly. Worth a shot. Do you guys ever get the feeling that Harry thinks everyone around him is really, really stupid?
Ginny asked.
Not stupid, just unobservant, Harry said. He's not even really denying it, Ginny complained. This way madness lies, Harry said sagely. So, in the interest of sparing you all from that, Wonka bars were Hershey and Willy Wonka is iconic. Wonka bars were Nestle, Hermione corrected him. Harry frowned. And that's not Hershey? They feel like they're the same thing. They're not. Now are you going to believe me? Or do I have to start citing sources? Hermione asked. Harry appeared to be actually thinking about it. Harry, I swear to God, Ron began. Harry sighed. Fine, I believe you. You're much smarter than me anyway. No matter what our very similar test scores say, Hermione muttered under her breath. What kind of candy would you have gotten me then?
Ginny asked.
Oh, I don't know, Hermione said. I'm not exactly an expert, If you say so, Neville said doubtfully. But I'd say Cadbury for the UK for sure, maybe something Belgian or Swiss. Toblerone is Swiss, and it's always solid, Hermione said. Yeah, I could always be boring, Harry huffed. What's wrong with the kind that Harry got me? Ginny asked, peering at the chocolate in her hand suspiciously. Nothing. Harry insisted, throwing up his hands to indicate his innocence. I mean, some people think it tastes like vomit, Hermione said. Oh, it is not, Harry said, rolling his eyes. And certainly not compared to the actual vomit-flavored candies wizards eat all the time. I personally don't think it tastes like vomit, but it has been an impression people have had, Hermione said. But it's the butyric acid. It's in milk and, while there is milk in many European chocolates, the milk is treated differently, which leads to less butyric acid. Butyric acid is found in vomit. So is chocolate if you eat it and then throw up, I guess. Hermione officially does not know what it means to be an expert, Neville said. Why would Americans put vomit stuff in their chocolate in the first place? Ron asked. It's not exactly vomit stuff, Hermione clarified. It's just that it's a component found in both. It's a good preservative, actually. You are throwing a lot of words at me that I don't understand, Ginny said bluntly. My chocolate is kind of vomit-wise. Does it taste vomit-y to you? Harry asked. Well, I didn't think so, but now I'm starting to wonder, Ginny replied. Don't do that, Hermione advised. That's just your brain changing your reality to fit your perception. Non-American people might also have an issue with Hershey's because it has a lot more sugar than they are used to. So too sweet, but also has a bitter or sour vomit-y flavor, Harry noted. Because that makes sense. Can we stop treating vomit-y like a word? Hermione asked, rolling her eyes. And it just doesn't taste the way the chocolate they're used to tastes. I think European wizard chocolate tastes more like European muggle chocolate than it does American muggle chocolate, but you can only use science to explain people's preferences so much. Ginny nodded slowly, mulling it all over. Harry, you owe me some Cadbury and Toblerone chocolate as well so I can compare and contrast. But how much did I just save you in this trial? Ginny interrupted. Fine. Most people don't know as much as I do about chocolate, I guess, Hermione said, shrugging. But my parents always talked a lot about it when I was growing up. Neville gave her a confused look. Aren't your parents dentists? That means that they wouldn't really be big candy people, right? Or did I misunderstand what those are? I think you understand fine, Luna said, coming up behind them. But you have to realize that as the daughter of a dentist, Hermione is honor-bound to advocate the Rotfong conspiracy. Luna, Hermione objected half-heartedly. So once again you give me a crappy score, Harry noted. This time I even scored lower than the guy who finished 25 minutes late. Luna shrugged at him. I told you that I was going to have to take points off for lack of effort. If I wasn't giving you extra points for finishing within the time limit, you would have gotten a 5. Why aren't you ever this harsh on the other champions? Harry demanded. Because they actually put some work into their solutions, Luna responded. Even Fred had to swim all the way to the bottom of the lake before George summoned him. With that, she began making her way back to the judge's platform. You know, I'm starting to suspect I would have been better off asking Snape to be my representative. Harry called after her.
Possibly, she called back.
But 10 to 1 he would have made you wear the uniform. Chapter 46. Also, people have expressed surprise that Krum is in last place. Harry and Fred, of course, have the advantage of being from the future or having his twin competing as well, respectively. Cedric also had some solid plans. Fleur's low scores were due to her skirt catching fire when she put the dragon to sleep and being attacked by some Grindylows, both of which can be put down to chance. The odds of both of those things happening again, when it was mostly just bad luck she was standing in the way and ran into the Grindylows, wasn't good enough for it to need to happen again. Krum's low scores were due to his not thinking to get the dragon out of the way before he hexed it and just being really late, the first which was a tactical error on his part, and the second due to his still not bringing a knife or something like Cedric did and not having Harry there to hand him a rock, even if he did find the hostages faster due to chance. You know, Sirius said with a theatrical sigh, it wasn't so bad learning all about your life through Rita Skeeter articles when I was on the run and literally risking my very soul in order to see you. When I'm teaching at your school and you're taking my class, though, it's kind of pathetic. You could always make an effort to seek me out, Harry pointed out. And I am doing so right now, Sirius replied. And let me tell you, I am both incredibly proud of, but slightly disturbed about the latest update on your little love square. I wouldn't say it's as square as I don't think Ginny, Hermione, or Luna have feelings for each other, so it would really be more like a bisected triangle, Harry nitpicked. Oh, and they're not even fighting over me in the first place. That's not what Rita Skeeter says, Sirius countered. I read all about it in today's article. Have you seen it? It's delightfully vapid. Harry shook his head. I never bother reading what Rita Skeeter has to say about me because my solicitor knows to sue for libel the minute the Daily Prophet crosses the line, and everyone else always lets me know what's going on in my life soon enough. Seriously, I would never have guessed these things about myself. Rita Skeeter, exposing such deep, dark secrets that you don't even realize you have them, Sirius agreed. So, what's it say today? Harry asked. Take a look, Sirius responded, tossing the paper at him. Harry looked down at the article. Harry Potter, Testing the Waters, by Rita Skeeter. As you are no doubt aware, Harry Potter is the boy who lived and saved us all from certain doom at the hands of you-know-who but 13 years ago. He is also a fourth-year Gryffindor and the American representative in the Pentawizard playoffs. One thing that is easy to forget, however, is the fact that he is also a teenage boy. Like many boys his age, Potter has just started to realize that half of the people around him are, in fact, girls. 3 in particular have caught his attention: Muggle-born Hermione Granger and purebloods Luna Lovegood and Ginevra Weasley. Each girl has their own unique advantages and disadvantages. Granger is one of Potter's closest friends and spend the most time with him, but a bad breakup could spell the end of that powerful friendship. Weasley is a fiery redhead like Potter's mother, but she is a year younger than him, and Potter's best friend might not take too kindly to Potter dating his sister. Finally, Lovegood is a very open-minded and free-spirited individual who can support many of Potter's unconventional views, but is in a different house and a year below him, as well as being a judge in the playoffs. Potter himself has expressed no preference to any of the girls, leading some to speculate that he is merely leading them on. Potter has vehemently denied such claims, stating Luna, Ginny, and Hermione are really great friends of mine. I respect all 3 far too much to even think of trying to pull something like that. Besides, I'm far too busy right now to worry about dating someone. When I do decide to start, though, I'm sure you'll know about it before I will. I can't believe she actually put that in there, Harry said, shaking his head in amusement. Seriously, do people have nothing better to do than obsess over my non-existent love life? Apparently not, Sirius replied. I just hope that Molly doesn't believe that I'm playing with her daughter, the girl she used to babysit, and her son's crush's hearts. Harry murmured. I mean, just look at how she treated Hermione when she thought she was two-timing me. So, how does the article fare after a quick reality check? Sirius inquired. Harry snorted. It doesn't even rate. Hermione never liked me before I started being as annoying as I possibly can. Luna knows about my crippling fear of accidentally being a pedophile, and Ginny, well, I am hoping she'll come around, but hopefully not for a while yet, so I don't have to reject her because she's too young and hurt my future chances with her. You do realize that just because you ended up with her in the past isn't necessarily an indication that you'll do so again in the future? Sirius asked. I mean, you're both different people, and she isn't the girl you have all those shared experiences with. It wouldn't be fair to her to constantly compare everything she does to the person she was in another time. I wouldn't, Harry declared heatedly. Share experiences or not, Ginny is Ginny and I love her. I don't want to be creepy, so I need to wait, but that isn't going to change. Sirius eyed him carefully. Just don't take it for granted, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt. Why can't they just tell us whatever we need to know inside? Fred grumbled as he, his twin, Cedric, and Harry made their way down to the Quidditch pitch to receive their instructions about the 3rd task. They just have to rub it in that we didn't get to play Quidditch this year, George added. Maybe they want to make sure no one can overhear us, or maybe they're using the Quidditch pitch for the 3rd task, Cedric suggested. What could they possibly be using the pitch for? George asked skeptically. What do you think, Harry? Fred asked. Harry shrugged. I don't really care one way or another, but my scars with Cedric. Your scar always takes Cedric's side, Fred noted. Is it possible it's in love with him? George asked. Harry shuddered. Dear God, I hope not. No offense or anything, Cedric, but that would be pretty awkward. I like girls, and there are enough rumors floating around about my love life as it is. None taken, Cedric assured him. I, too, feel it would be rather awkward to have my friend's supposedly psychic facial disfigurement in love with me. I mean, there's no way I'd even know unless you told me, but knowing you, you probably would. In excruciating detail, Harry shrugged again. If I would have to deal with it, so would you. He bumped into Fred. Hey, why'd you stop? Fred and George both took that moment to fall to their knees instead of answering him. No, what the dash? Harry was all for melodrama, but usually it had a purpose. What was wrong? The pitch, Cedric exclaimed, sounding a little upset. Oh, right, Harry remembered. The pitch is being turned into a hedge maze. George turned accusing eyes to Harry. You knew? I told you my scar agreed with Cedric, Harry pointed out. I'm going to take the fact that you didn't feel the need to mention this to me as a clear sign that your scar sees me as just a friend, and then let the matter drop, Cedric announced. Good, because we have more pressing things to worry about, Fred told him. Such as, why? God, why? Surely it's not that bad, Bagman claimed as he stepped forward to greet them. He had been standing with Fleur and Victor just 20 feet away from them. "You're speaking to 4 Quidditch fanatics, sir," Harry informed him. 5 if you count Victor. 6 if you play, he asked Fleur. "A little," she answered. "I was not on any booze team, though." Bagman's smile faded a little. "Well, that will be back to normal in no time after the playoffs are over, don't worry." "Is this why we couldn't have Quidditch this year?" Harry demanded. "Because you'd think we could have just gotten all the matches out of the way before April." "You have to ask Professor Dumbledore about that, I'm afraid," Bagman replied. "Can anyone tell me what this is?" "If we do we get a prize?" Harry asked immediately. "No," Bagman answered shortly. "Then I'm sure I don't know," Harry said. No one said anything for a moment. They just stared at each other, waiting for someone to answer the obvious question. Victor looked away first. "Maze," he supplied, rolling his eyes. "Very good." Bagman beamed, like being able to recognize a maze was any sort of accomplishment at their age. A maze. The third task's really very straightforward. The Triwizard Cup will be placed in the center of the maze. The first champion to touch it will receive full marks. "We simply ave to get through the maze," said Fleur, looking decidedly unimpressed. How that girl had ever chosen to stay in Great Britain after so very clearly hating every minute of her 7th year there was, quite frankly, a complete mystery. "There will be obstacles," said Bagman happily, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Hagrid is providing a number of creatures, then there will be spells that must be broken, all that sort
of thing, you know."
Now, the champions who are leading on points will get a head start into the maze. Bagman grinned at Harry, Fred, and George, followed by Mr. Diggory. Then Miss Delacour will enter, and finally Mr. Crumb, but you'll all be in with a fighting chance, depending how well you get past the obstacles. Should be fun, eh? "So, you are saying that our point totals are completely worthless?" Fleur asked. "Because it does not matter if OO is ahead, but OO touches the cup first?" "Not at all," Bagman insisted. "Because the more points you have, the sooner you get to go into the maze. For instance, Harry and Mr. Weasley each have 121 points, while Mr. Crumb has but 95. That's a 26-point difference, which means they should have a good 15-minute head start. But since it is a maze, then I am thinking that you really mean that we didn't need to bother with the first 2 tasks at all," Crumb countered. "Well, if there are no more questions, then we can all head back up to the castle," Bagman said loudly. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," Lockhart was saying as Harry walked by an apparently occupied classroom. Naturally, he stopped to listen. Moody laughed harshly. "I'm sure you don't. I've never thought you were anywhere near talented enough to pull off half of the accomplishments you've laid claim to, and with the amnesia that pops up at the sight of each of your victories, you have to wonder." "No, you really don't," Lockhart countered, sounding annoyed. "I prefer to let my accomplishments speak for themselves and not go around showing off my magical prowess, because that would just be over the top. Dumbledore does, but he also hasn't written a series of books, so that's not too much as far as he's concerned. And the amnesia?" Moody impressed. "Psychological trauma? Head trauma? Spell gone wrong?" Lockhart suggested. "That last one sounds about right," Moody informed him. "One case of lost memory in a town where they've had such problems that I've needed to step in is hardly out of the ordinary," Lockhart insisted. "Now don't you have anything better to do? Better than investigating a possible crime or a series of crimes?" Moody challenged. "What could possibly be more important than that?" "Grading papers?" Lockhart offered. "Interrogating either Snape or Karkaroff about possible Death Eater activity. Stopping Bagman from scamming schoolchildren with bets he has no intention of repaying. Keeping Rita Skeeter off the premise." "I've already done the first 3, Moody announced. "And that last one is really none of my concern. For the love of God, aren't you supposed to be retired?" Lockhart exclaimed. "I am," Moody conceded, opening the classroom door. "But that's not nearly as entertaining as you might think. I'll let you go for now, but I'll be back when I have more questions." "Don't hurry back," Lockhart called after him. Moody nodded at Harry.
"Potter."
"Harry's?" Lockhart brightened immediately. "How are you?" "I'm good," Harry said distractedly. "Is he dash?"
"Who?"
"Moody." Lockhart asked. No, don't worry about it. He's suspicious about me, but then he's suspicious about everyone up to, and including Professor Dumbledore himself. Apparently his sister had some sort of mysterious death or something. Either way. He has no proof, and I'm not careless enough for there to be any for him to find. That's good, Harry said. So, how's being a headmaster suiting you? Surprising well, Lockhart replied. The lack of an actual school or students aside from Fred and George means there's practically no work, but the publicity is great. Though you would not believe the flood of applications I keep getting. Harry raised an eyebrow. Applications? Lockhart shook his head pityingly. Harry, you create a Harry Potter school of awesomeness which combines two things that people love. You and awesomeness. And you don't expect people to apply? You've come a long way, but you clearly have some work yet to do. Well, I've only been at it for a little over 2 years, Harry said defensively. Still, you're leaps and bounds ahead of Victor, Lockhart remarked. He just looked confused when I suggested that he sue whoever is selling unauthorized merchandise of him and get in on the profits. He's coming around, though. But enough about that. How are you as far as the third task? Harry shrugged. It's a maze. I know a spell that can help me find the cup's general location. Could you be any less specific? Lockhart requested. Harry made a face. I really don't know. There's supposed to be magical creatures in there, so a boggett's a good guess. There are acromantula in the Forbidden Forest, so maybe there will be a few of them roaming about. A sphinx is always good for a maze, so maybe I should brush up on inane riddles, and they've got to get rid of the blast-ended scripts somehow, right? So you've got a plan? Lockhart asked. After all, it simply wouldn't do to fail miserably during the task and possibly even need rescuing after such a strong showing. Remember, Harry, your age makes you the underdog in the competition, and no one wants to see the underdog lose. Harry nodded. I know, and I'm about as prepared as I can be. It's not even the maze I'm really worried about because I'll be fine. I just need to get to the cup before anybody else does. Well, yes, I suppose it would be exceedingly difficult to die during the playoffs since Dumbledore has introduced all these ridiculous safety features, Lockhart concurred. But should any of you die, at least you waited until the third task. Because when you die, timing is just so important, Harry deadpanned. Exactly, Lockhart agreed, sounding perfectly serious. Chapter 47. Also, people have commented that Harry forgot to remind Cedric about the graveyards when they were finding out about the third task. Since Harry met up with Cedric before the scene started, it's entirely possible that he reminded him then. The morning of June 24th, Harry was probably more nervous than he'd been the entire time he'd been back, including right after Pettigrew had made off with the diary. While Moody was still mysteriously moody, Harry really didn't feel he'd done anything that could possibly affect Voldemort that much, especially as they'd only technically met the once. Even though he still suspected that Voldemort might take advantage of all the publicity involved in the third task to start something, especially as from what he understood Voldemort had mostly just pretended he didn't exist for a year to try and get his hands on the prophecy, which wouldn't have been necessary had he died in the graveyard like planned. He really didn't have much more of an idea about what was going to happen than anyone else. Harry thought he might know why things weren't playing out exactly like they were supposed to. Peter Pettigrew was rotting in Azkaban and not off running into Bertha Jorkins, and then Voldemort in Albania. What did that mean, though? Was Voldemort still in Albania? If he had gotten tired of waiting, was he back in Britain? Had he found any of his old followers? Was he planning anything? Harry didn't know the answers to any of those questions, but he wasn't about to take any chances. One thing he did know was that, even if it killed him, Cedric Diggory would live to see the 25th. After breakfast, Harry followed the twins into the chamber off the Great Hall and wondered who, if anybody, would be there for him. Sirius would, of course, but Harry saw him all the time since they both lived at Hogwarts most of the year, and the Weasleys would also be attending, but that was because the twins were competing. Watcher, Harry, Tonks greeted him, answering his question. Remus was standing next to her. What are you guys doing here? Harry asked, surprised. I'm Sirius's cousin, so since you're his godson, and he has custody of you, that practically makes us family, she announced. And I'm your backup godfather, Remus explained. Harry cocked his head. Why would I need a backup godfather? Remus looked a little awkward. Your parents, they loved Sirius to death, believe me, but they didn't necessarily have as much faith that he would make it to 30. He was rather reckless after all. Was not, Sirius denied. And I seem to have made it to the ripe old age of 34 just fine. That's really not that old, Tonks interjected, glancing at Remus. It is for the next year or so, Sirius said sternly. How can you possibly say you're not reckless? Remus demanded. I seem to remember one incident of reckless in particular that got you unceremoniously thrown into Azkaban for a good decade. Okay, seriously, what is with these widespread delusions about me having ever stepped foot in that assuredly vile place? Sirius demanded. Maybe they just find that easier to believe than you abandoning your tragically orphaned godson? Tonks suggested. I said I was sorry. Sirius insisted. What do you think, Harry? I would ask Moony, but he's clearly delusional as well. Harry merely raised his eyebrows. Rackspurts, of course, Sirius nodded. So, Harry, is it true what Rita Skeeter wrote about you? Tonks inquired. Probably not, Harry replied promptly. But just to be sure, you should probably elaborate. About your love square? Tonks clarified. You mean love bisected triangle, Sirius corrected. Right that, Tonks agreed absently, staring seriously at Harry. Dear God, no, Harry assured her. Tonks let out a sigh of relief. Good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I really like you, kid, and if girls are going to chase after you, there's nothing you can do, but if I find out you're playing with them, then we will have issues. Harry gulped. Understood. As they started to make their way outside, they were stopped by Amos Diggory. Harry took the opportunity to see that Fleur was still checking Bill out. Well, that was one relationship he wasn't managing to interfere with, although who knew how an altered war, or, with any luck, none at all, would affect them? Congratulations on getting that bill passed, Mr. Diggory was telling Remus. Remus nodded. Thanks. It took a while, and I'm sure the bill's opponent's having something planned, but I'll deal with that when it comes, and just appreciate the fact that werewolves have full rights and legal action can be taken for job discrimination now. And Harry Potter, you must be so full of yourself since you're ahead of Cedric in the point totals, Mr. Diggory said, turning to him. Better me than you, Harry muttered automatically. When he realized what he said, his eyes widened in mild horror. I mean, Even with this slight disadvantage, don't count set out yet, Mr. Diggory said loudly, opting to ignore Harry's inopportune comment. You may have a head start, but he can still come from behind and beat you. After all, he's done it before. Dad, Cedric looked embarrassed. Not this again, Harry snorted. Like the rest of the Quidditch team, would let me forget. And I've had an advantage over Cedric in the last 2 tasks. And what's that? Mr. Diggory demanded, outraged. He's too noble, Harry explained. That will probably serve him well in life, assuming it doesn't get him killed. And speaking of, Cedric, graveyards. Run like hell, Cedric answered without having to think. Mr. Diggory looked confused. What? Later, Harry quickly said, darting out of the chamber and leaving Cedric to try and explain. Are you sure you're going to be okay? Sirius asked him right before he joined the other champions at the start of the maze. Harry had enjoyed his day with Remus, Tonks, and his godfather, but it had been somewhat less enjoyable than it might have been since he knew very well what could happen and hoped that even if he couldn't avoid it, it at least wouldn't get any worse than it had been the first time around. Not even slightly, Harry confessed. But what else can I do? I don't know, Sirius answered the rhetorical question. But remember, the minute you need me, Dumbledore or a whole squadron of Aurors contact me on the mirror and tell me where you are. If you're in the graveyard, getting there shouldn't be a problem, but even if you go somewhere else, we'll find some way to deal with this. Thanks, Harry said, before quickly taking his place amongst the champions. It always unnerved him when his godfather stated acting serious. After all, that meant that they were probably doomed. Harry had been in the maze for at least half an hour now, and he was really starting to appreciate Crouch Jr.'s efforts the first time around in clearing his path, as he'd had to deal with no less than 4 oversized blast-ended Skrewts, 3 Acromantula, and some kind of snake. The snake hadn't been so bad to deal with, actually, as it had immediately stopped trying to bite him once it saw that he was its speaker. He didn't quite get why snakes were always so eager to listen to him just because he happened to speak their language, or at least he would for as long as he was a Horcrux. But then again, if Parazeltong was really even half as rare as he'd been led to believe, none of the snakes he encountered, save the basilisk, had likely encountered another Parselmouth and thought he was a novelty of some kind. Which he was. Still, convincing the snake not to follow him around the maze had eaten up a good chunk of his time. Harry turned a corner and nearly walked right into a sphinx.
He groaned.
Not again, I'm really no good at riddles. It is your bad luck to have met me then, the sphinx replied. Can I just go? Harry asked. Seriously, I'll find a different way. No, the sphinx replied. I'm going to ask you a riddle, and if you get it right, you can go past. And if I get it wrong or try to leave, you'll attack, right? Harry asked. The sphinx nodded.
Right.
Do not worry, though, as I am not permitted to kill you. That said, healers can work all sorts of miracles these days. I don't suppose it's a spider, is it? Harry asked wryly. The sphinx blinked. You don't suppose what is a spider?
Me?
I quite clearly not. And when was the last time a talking spider asked you riddles anyway? I don't actually recall that ever happening, Harry answered. That said, I meant, was that the answer? Although your reaction tells me that it's not. How about the man? That's the answer to the stereotypical Sphinx riddle. As if I would be so unoriginal, the Sphinx sniffed. Now stop guessing and let me ask you the riddle before I decide to start counting those guesses and land you in a coma. Harry opened his mouth to tell the Sphinx to go ahead and ask him, but decided not to push him luck and just gestured to her instead. The Sphinx smiled lazily. That's better. Now let's see, they have not flesh, nor feathers, nor scales, nor bone. Yet they have fingers and thumbs of their own. What are they? Harry stared at her for a minute. Come again. Patiently, the Sphinx repeated. They have not flesh, nor feathers, nor scales, nor bone. Yet they have fingers and thumbs of their own. What are they? No flesh, feathers, scales, or bones that rules out all living things except plants, I guess. But they don't have fingers or thumbs. The no-be-ones things rules out most dead things as well. I guess it could be a statue, but that's just if I were thinking literally and not taking into account the fact that this is a riddle. Hey, Harry stopped as a thought occurred to him. Is it okay if I think out loud? The Sphinx shrugged.
Be my guest.
That's bound to be more interesting than watching you just stand there for 5 minutes. You'll have to tell me what you've decided on once you have your answer, though. Can do, Harry said gratefully. I think better verbally, anyway. Let's see, fingers and thumbs could be a kind of measurement. I know you can have a finger of either whiskey or scotch, but I can't think of anything for thumbs. Well, there is having a thumb of gold, but I think that had more to do with millers and dishonesty or something like that. Let's see, if there are fingers and thumbs involved, there is probably a hand involved, but it's not on anything that was once living. A robot? I highly doubt a mythical creature would be up to date on Muggle technology, though, since most magical humans don't know anything. Still, a hand made out of synthetic material sounds promising. I just need to think more about something wizards might be familiar with. What do wizards do when they lose a hand? Use a hook? That doesn't have any fingers or thumbs, though. Wormtail had a silver hand, but since he had to have Riddle create that, it's probably too complicated or obscure for most people. Wait. Yes, the Sphinx, who was starting to look a little dizzy watching Harry pace back and forth and think in circles, asked eagerly. How about a hand covering? Like a glove or a mitten? Harry asked. You need to pick one, the Sphinx said sternly. If it's not right, and that's my guess, does it really matter which one I go with? Harry didn't really see how it would. Of course it matters, the Sphinx insisted. You have to do these things properly, or no one will take you seriously.
Fine, Harry sighed.
Let's see. I know one of them has a thumb and 4 fingers while the other has 1 thumb and 1 giant finger, but I can't remember which is which. The one with the 4 fingers is more convenient than the one with the 1 finger because there's more mobility and all your fingers don't keep bumping into each other. Mitten is a much nicer name than glove, so you would think it would go with the nicer hand covering, but I think it might actually be the opposite. Since the riddle asked for fingers, to be plural, that would make my answer glove. The Sphinx took a moment before answering. That was so much more complicated than it had to be. We all have our faults, Harry said defensively, crossing his arms. One of mine is that I'm really bad at riddles. And can't tell the difference between gloves and mittens, the Sphinx added helpfully. Harry glared at her. I can so tell them apart. I just get the names mixed up. It happens.
He paused.
But yes, that too. So, was I right? Yes, you can go, the Sphinx said, stepping aside to allow him to pass. And make sure to brush up on your riddles. The sad thing is I did brush up on them, Harry called back. He turned a few more corners and stopped short at the sight of Voldemort laughing over Cedric's body.
What?
But how? There's no way he got to Hogwarts so easily. It took Draco a year, Boggett. Cedric dying and Voldemort returning would be his greatest fear at the moment, wouldn't it? As they both could happen, had happened that night. Ridiculous, he cried, remembering the cheer that had gone up when Voldemort had finally lay dead after yet another botched Avada Kedavra sent Harry's way. You'd think he would have learned his lesson the first time and used a different, equally lethal curse, but apparently he couldn't be bothered. Point me, Harry whispered. Following the path the spell had indicated, he reached the clearing the cup was in just as Cedric and the twins did. I can't believe the hedge tried to eat us, Fred said before he noticed them. I mean, what is wrong with these people that they would stick us in a maze with deadly creatures when the maze itself was trying to kill us? I don't know, but look, George said, pointing to the cup. Where are Victor and Fleur? Harry asked. Back there somewhere, Cedric gestured vaguely behind him. I haven't seen any sparks nor heard any screams, so they're probably fine. What now? Fred asked. We lunge for the cup? Whoever touches it first gets it. We're all about equal distance away, so it could be anyone's game, but that seems like such an arbitrary way of deciding it. We could try dueling for it, George offered. Cedric shook his head. No good. There are two of you and Harry and I are alone. Even if only one of you dueled, it would still be three people squaring off, and that's not even. One person would get ganged up on or just sit back and watch the other two exhaust themselves, and that won't prove anything. Then what do you suggest? George asked. We all made it here at the same time, so it's a tie, Cedric said simply. Regardless of whatever school we've been entered under, we're all Hogwarts students. We had hoped to get all the prize money, Fred said mournfully. But you're right. A tie it is. He reached out for the cup, and Cedric did the same. No. Harry burst out. The other three turned to look at him strangely. What's wrong? George asked. Can't stand the thought of a tie? Harry shook his head. I'm all for tying. In fact, you three can win, and I don't have to get any credit for all I care. I just need to be the first one to touch that cup. Why? Cedric asked. Harry hesitated. If you don't tell us, we're going to assume that everything's fine and grab it, Fred warned. Harry sighed. I don't know for sure, but there's every chance that that cup is a portkey that will bring us to a graveyard where a madman is trying to revive Voldemort. A graveyard, you say? Cedric asked thoughtfully. Is that why you kept saying dash? Yeah, Harry admitted. It was. Why didn't you warn us then if you were so concerned? George demanded. Honestly, it didn't occur to me, Harry confessed. Sorry. Why don't you find out one way or another and throw a rock at the cup or something? Fred suggested. If it's a portkey, we'll just send up sparks and explain that the cup is gone. If not, then we'll just pretend it never happened. That won't work, Cedric said, shaking his head. The cup is a portkey one way or another, but to prevent the winner from getting ambushed on their way out, the cup is supposed to take us to the outside of the maze. Well, Harry hadn't known that, but it would explain why grabbing the cup in the graveyard had taken him to the outside of the maze instead of the center, or even took him anywhere at all, as if Crouch Jr. had been the one to make it a portkey at all, as he wouldn't want to give him a chance to escape. Although flinging Harry's body at it and letting the world know Voldemort was back might have appealed to him. We can let the portkey go, then send up sparks, and as we're the only ones here and all agree to tie, we can explain that we all won when someone comes to check on us, Fred suggested. No, I need to go there, Harry disagreed. Why? Cedric demanded. If you're right, you'll just get yourself killed. Possibly, but I need to stop him, and now's my best chance, Harry said urgently. I don't like it, George said, shaking his head. If you're wrong, you end up winning the playoffs, and if you're right, you go alone to some sort of ritual with a madman and get yourself killed. It has to be done, Harry said shortly. Then we're going with you, Cedric told him. The twins nodded their agreement, their faces full of grim determination. No, I need to do this by myself, Harry insisted. We're standing closer than you, Fred pointed out. If you don't say, yes, we'll touch the portkey without you, and see what happens. That couldn't happen. They would just get themselves killed, and as he was still a Horcrux, literally had no chance of stopping Voldemort. All right, he agreed reluctantly. Cedric and either Fred or George can come, too. Why only one? George demanded. Because one of us needs to stay here and send up sparks. By the time you're rescued, you'll know if we're outside of the maze or if we need you to tell Dumbledore that the cup was a portkey. We reached it, and now we're missing, Harry explained. He pulled out his invisibility cloak and 2 daggers and handed them to Cedric. And whoever goes with me needs to keep this on at all times. They won't kill me right away, but they will kill you. And if you see a giant snake, kill it with one of these, or the Avada Kedavra. Okay, Cedric agreed solemnly. The twins exchanged looks. Finally, George took a deep breath and said, You go. Your name came out of the cup, so you go. Are you sure? Fred looked torn. Just don't you dare die on me, George said, his voice a little higher than normal. Or I swear to God. I wouldn't dream of it, Fred promised. As the 3 designated graveyard travelers reached out to touch the portkey, Harry really hoped he'd be able to keep that promise. Chapter 48. Harry doesn't want Cedric or Fred to use Avada Kedavra. He wants them to use the dagger. Since Nagini is a Horcrux, if they can't kill it with the dagger, then Avada Kedavra or Fiendfire would be the only 2 ways to do it, and Fiendfire is rare and hard to control. Also, I felt that when they told Harry that if he tried to take the cup without explaining, they would touch it first. We're standing closer than you, Fred pointed out. If you don't say, yes, we'll touch the portkey without you, and see what happens. Pretty clearly meant that they were closer and could get to it before Harry, but people often ask things in reviews like, why couldn't Harry have grabbed it first? Or, why couldn't Harry have stunned them? And I wanted to explain it then instead of having to explain it now. Of course, then people asked about summoning the cup, but if he raised his wand to do that, the twins and Cedric would have grabbed the cup and left him behind. Even if he managed to get an Accio out, it's not instantaneous, and he couldn't guarantee that he'd get the portkey before one of them grabbed it. And about Remus. Even if he was the backup godfather, there really was no way the Ministry was going to hand custody of their savior to a werewolf. Even if most people don't know, some do, and Dumbledore was dead set on getting Harry to the Dursleys.
He still could have visited, though.
If nothing else, Harry was in the magical word most of the time for over 2 years by the time they met in canon. Harry kept his eyes closed as they traveled. He half hoped that he was wrong, and he would land outside of the maze to the thunderous sound of applause and a lot of consternation from anyone who didn't happen to favor Hogwarts. Sure, that would mean that he had no idea what was going on, and Voldemort could do worse, but at least then he might manage to face Voldemort without anyone else insisting on accompanying him. He did have the best track record in dealing with the self-proclaimed Dark Lord, after all, save perhaps Dumbledore. When Harry opened his eyes, though, he was disappointed to find that he was, once again, lying in a cemetery near the Riddle family plot. A quick glance around showed no one else in sight, so Fred and Cedric were still under the cloak and Voldemort and his non-marauder accomplice would be further away, giving them some time. Muffliato. You guys there? Harry asked quietly. Yeah, Fred whispered back. I can't believe you were actually right. It does happen, Harry acknowledged. How about you, Cedric? I think I'm having a panic attack from all of your conditioning this year, Cedric answered honestly. Running would be a great idea, but it would be a bit difficult with 2 people under the invisibility cloak. Still, you need to get out of the way, Harry told them. What's going on, Harry? Fred demanded. We don't have time. I'll explain later. Remember, you need to kill the giant snake. Be very careful with those daggers as I coated them in basilisk venom, and no, I'm not going to explain why now. At some point it will probably look like I'm dead, but if the person who's killed me collapses as well, I'll be fine. If not, just grab the port key and go. If you have to, silence yourselves. Do you understand? Harry swore as a possible flaw in his plan occurred to him.
What?
Cedric asked, sounding a little anxious. We have brother wands. I'll need to switch wands with one of you, or I won't be able to do a thing, Harry explained. Here, Cedric offered, holding out his wand. It was a little surreal to see a wand appear out of nowhere and floating in midair. It won't work as well as your wand since it didn't choose you or whatever, but at least it doesn't have an unfortunate connection to whoever it is you're going to be facing. Thanks, Cedric, Harry said gratefully, accepting the wand. Ashwood with unicorn hair, if he remembered correctly. It was maybe an inch and a half longer than his. He held his own wand out for Cedric to take. Please try not to die. You too, Fred. You're awfully morbid tonight, Fred noted. It's beginning to scare me. Harry shrugged. Yeah, well, this could all go to hell really quickly. Remember, you're not here, so don't draw attention to yourselves if you can help it. Got it, Cedric said. You sure about this? Harry shook his head. Not nearly, but we're kind of a little late for second-guessing. You don't die either, Harry, Fred said seriously. Because let me tell you that if I let you die, my family, well, I'd probably be better off throwing myself between you and an Avada Kedavra. I'll try not to, Harry promised. Let's go, Cedric said. Harry waited until he was fairly certain that his friends were not in his general area anymore before canceling the muffliato. Oh God, he cried immediately, jumping to his feet. A graveyard? They never told us there was another part of the third task. That's because there isn't, a voice said from behind him. Harry turned around to see who it was. He could just vaguely recognize him, whoever it was, but God help him, he didn't know who it was. Stupefied, Harry opened his eyes slowly and took stock of his surroundings. He was tied to a grave, which was not good. The fair-haired man who'd stunned him was standing in front of a large stone cauldron while a giant snake slithered around, and Voldemort, who was currently resembling a very ugly baby, was lying next to the cauldron. That was surprisingly a good thing, but Harry hoped that Nagini would neither take notice of or see fit to inform Voldemort of Fred and Cedric's presence. I activated the Dark Mark and called your Death Eaters, my lord, the strangely familiar man said. And it looks like Potter's waking up. Good, the little bundle of evil said, sounding pleased. Let's hurry this up, Crouch. It wouldn't do for any of my less loyal servants to see my rebirth. Crouch? That was it. He'd first seen this man in person exactly one lifetime ago when he was so busy alternatively pressing for details about Voldemort's return and trying to kill him that he'd neglected to take his polyjuice. Of course, my master. Crouch Jr. bowed before picking little Voldemort up. Harry watched quietly as Crouch almost reverently unwrapped his master, revealing what was still the ugliest baby he had ever seen. It actually looked like one of those hybrids straight from out of a Greek myth with its lack of hair, undersized appendages, scaly skin, lack of a proper nose, and to top it off, the creature was a reddish-black. In short, it was a very ugly, very snake-like, very possessed child. Crouch gently lowered Voldemort into the cauldron, a look of utter devotion and slight insanity on his face. Of course, Harry might be biased, but how could anyone looking so thrilled about carrying that possibly be sane? Bone of the father unknowingly given, you will renew your son, Crouch said, raising his wand and pointing it in Harry's general direction. Harry watched as the surface around his feet cracked and a fine trail of dust floated up into the air and landed gently in the cauldron. The water immediately started hissing as it sent sparks in all directions and turned a vibrant, deadly-looking blue. Harry hoped that was how the ritual was supposed to go because otherwise Sirius's plan of switching the bones out would be for naught, and he would probably need all the help he could get. Crouch was looking almost eager now as he pulled out a long silver dagger from his cloak. Flesh of the servant, willingly given, you will revive your master, he said before casually lopping off his left hand. Once the severed flesh made contact with the concoction, it turned a bright red. True to his image as fanatic, Crouch didn't even scream, but he did pause to cast a spell to staunch the bleeding before beginning to approach Harry. Blood of the enemy, Forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe, Crouch said, kneeling beside Harry. Harry knew that intent was very important in spellcasting and made a split-second decision to try to further weaken Voldemort's new body. He subtly shifted his body closer to the dagger than Crouch was bringing down on him. How's that for forcibly taken? He kind of needed the ritual to succeed in order to be able to destroy the Horcrux in himself relatively safely, after all. Harry winced, but didn't cry out. It wouldn't do to look pathetic when Crouch, insane or not, hadn't made a sound when losing his hand. Oh God, couldn't you have at least cleaned that or something? Harry couldn't help asking, wrinkling his nose in distaste. He hadn't been planning on taunting Voldemort until after the ritual was complete, but this was extremely unsanitary. Crouch rolled his eyes. Don't complain, Potter. You're getting a chance to partake in a ritual to bring back the greatest wizard who ever lived. It's an honor many would die for. As a matter of fact, it's an honor you will die for. Did something happen to Dumbledore? Harry asked innocently. Crouch ignored that and held out a vial to catch droplets of Harry's blood. You're about to have bigger problems than an infection, little boy. Once Crouch deemed he'd collected enough blood, he hurried back to Voldemort's side and carefully poured the blood in. Instantly, the liquid in the cauldron turned such a blinding white that it was difficult to make out anything else. All too soon, the light show was over and a thick pillar of smoke billowed from the cauldron. When the mist cleared, Harry got to see firsthand the results of the ritual as the dark outline of a tall and emaciated-looking man emerged from the cauldron. "Robe me," Voldemort demanded, apparently too triumphant to be bothered to do it himself. Or possibly he never bothered and always relied on his minions. It was kind of disturbing either way. Crouch nodded curtly. "Right away, my lord." He bent down, picked up the black robes that Voldemort had been using as swaddling clothes not 10 minutes before, shook them out, and pulled them one-handed over his master's head. Voldemort scarcely paid this any attention, as he only had eyes for Harry. Harry stared back, wondering what he was supposed to do until the Death Eaters showed up. He really hoped Voldemort wasn't about to start monologuing again. He had been too traumatized last time to say anything, but he really didn't care about the family history of the man who had murdered his parents. He cared even less this time now that he already knew the story. "You look like a snake," Harry offered at last. Voldemort looked faintly pleased. "Indeed? Such a noble animal. What do you think?" he asked Crouch. "The resemblance is uncanny," Crouch said loyally. Voldemort turned his attention to his brand-new body, as if searching for the resemblance. In the course of his inspection, he drew a wand and pointed it at Crouch. The supposedly dead Death Eater was lifted off the ground and hurled against Harry's headstone. Crouch didn't react to that, either, but he did quickly scramble to his feet. "Hold out your arm," Voldemort ordered. Obediently, Crouch rolled up his sleeves and presented both of them to the newly revived madman. Voldemort carefully eyed the dark mark. "They will be here soon, and then we can hear their excuses." Voldemort spun suddenly to face Harry. "You stand, Harry Potter, upon the remains of my late father," he announced. "A muggle and a fool, very like your dear mother." "My mother was a witch," Harry pointed out. "And from what I understand, you only ever met your father on the day you killed him. Whatever his faults, it really wasn't his fault your mother dosed him with a love potion and deluded herself into believing he really loved her. After that kind of enslavement, of course he left. If he'd stayed, she might have done it again." "Crucio," Voldemort said, stabbing his wand at Harry. Harry bit his tongue so hard it started to bleed, but managed not to cry out. "Oh, real mature," he said, turning his head and spitting out the blood. "My mother did not dose my father with love potions. She told him she was a witch, and he left. He returned to his muggle parents before I was even born, and she died giving birth to me, leaving me alone to be raised in a muggle orphanage during the worst oppression in living memory. He could have found me, should have found me, but he did nothing. Nonetheless, I took vengeance on that fool who gave me his name, Tom Riddle." Voldemort trailed off. Harry knew he really should quit while he was ahead, but all he could think about were the people Voldemort would go on to kill, if he wasn't stopped here. 2 of them were hidden somewhere in this very graveyard, even. How was he supposed to find you if your mother just disappeared? Harry asked reasonably. And since your father left before you were born, it was really your mother who gave you his name. Seriously, you could have just changed it. Starting a war because of your daddy issues kind of lame. And why on earth are you advertising your status as half-blood anyway? Doesn't that kind of go across your message of pure-blood supremacy? That earned Harry another crescendo, but he swore it was worth it. Listen to me, reliving family history, Voldemort mused. One would almost think I was growing sentimental. If one didn't know you were a raging sociopath, Harry muttered. Voldemort ignored him in favor of watching the arrival of his minions. Harry could only hope. Fred and Cedric had gotten back far enough as to not be in the way as they were suddenly surrounded by Death Eaters. Harry had seen more than enough of full-grown men bowing and scraping to the psychopath before him and automatically tuned the groveling, and "I knew you'd be back." Harry jolted back to attention as a stinging hex was fired at him. "Pay attention," Crouch hissed. Harry noticed he had a nice, new silver hand. Harry would bet this ghostly appendage wouldn't end up strangling the man it was attached to. And speaking of, he still wasn't even remotely glad he'd saved Pettigrew. Yes, that moment of weakness and deception-sensing hand might have let them escape, but if it hadn't been for him, Voldemort might not have come back so soon. Although his current predicament suggested he might have found a way. And sure enough, Voldemort was done terrorizing his servants for the moment and had returned his attention to Harry. "Harry Potter has kindly joined us for my rebirthing party," Voldemort was saying. "One might go so far as to call him my guest of honor." "Guest of honor?" Harry repeated. "I think this just goes on to further prove that Riddle here can't actually distinguish between allies and enemies." There was a dead silence as the Death Eaters stood frozen in shock that someone would dare speak to their master like that. It was a good thing Bellatrix wasn't there. She would probably have tried to kill him. Crescendo. Voldemort cast again. Harry idly wondered how many times the Longbottoms had undergone that curse before snapping, and hoped he wouldn't find out. "Don't call me that, Potter." "What else am I supposed to call you?" Harry demanded when the curse was let up. "You know who? He who must not be named? The Dark Lord? I'm not a Death Eater, and I've met you before, so I have no desire to use any of those appellations. What about my chosen name?" Voldemort replied. "No one would actually tell me what that was, and Dumbledore always called you Riddle." Harry lied apologetically. Voldemort introduced. "I believe that everyone should know the name of the man that kills them." "I'll make sure to do that," Harry said agreeably. "Master, we crave to know, we beg you to tell us, how you have achieved this miracle, how you managed to return to us." Lucius simpered as he figured he was the least likely person there besides Crouch, who already knew, to get crush'd for asking. What a story it is, Lucius," said Voldemort. "And it begins, and ends, with my young friend here. You know, of course, that they have called this boy my downfall. You all know that on the night I lost my powers and my body, I tried to kill him. His mother died in the attempt to save him, and unwittingly provided him with a protection I admit I had not foreseen. I could not touch the boy." He raised one of his long white fingers and put it very close to Harry's cheek. "His mother left upon him the traces other sacrifice. This is old magic. I should have remembered it. I was foolish to overlook it, but no matter. I can touch him now." Harry felt the cold tip of the long white finger touch him and thought his head would burst with the pain. "That's quite an accomplishment," he managed to say. "Of course, everyone else save Quirrell managed it just fine, but way to aspire to such mediocrity." Voldemort just chuckled darkly and began to explain his journey from the night he failed to kill Harry to where he was now. "And then, not even a year ago, when I had almost abandoned hope, it happened at last. A witch stumbled onto me. She was foolish and flighty and had suffered some brain damage as the result of an overzealous memory charm. In short, she was perfect. Perfect to possess. Perfect to free my loyal servant." He nodded at Crouch. "Bertha Jorkins. She had never been so useful in her life. She was traveling in Albania and passed through my forest alone. Her body did not last long and her mind lasted even less, but I got what I needed. passage back to Britain, and the knowledge that a loyal servant was within my grasp. Bartemius Crouch may have denied me at his trial, but years of enslavement, first in Azkaban and then in his own home by his own father, hardened his resolve and turned him into someone whose loyalty to me is absolute. Dear Bertha arrived at the Crouch house one day and encountered a house elf and Crouch. Crouch Sr. panicked and cast the strongest memory charm he could on the girl. When I broke it, she was lost to me, but no matter. I went to the Crouch house, and I retrieved my servant. So that was how it was. Crouch had been freed because of Bertha again. He didn't know why he was so surprised. After all, he hadn't seen any of the major players in that little drama aside from Voldemort before the Quidditch Cup. Voldemort stepped in front of Harry, apparently done with his little speech for now. And here he is, the boy you all had thought to be my downfall.
Crescendo.
That was what for times that night. He went through too many more, and he wouldn't be able to help screaming. He waited a moment after Voldemort let up in order to make sure he could keep his voice steady before saying, "Yes, you can torture an unarmed and restrained opponent. Clearly this proves you're better than me. Of course, I've never gotten my ass handed to me by an infant, but I'm sure that's not as absurd as it sounds." Voldemort's eyes narrowed into angry slits. "I want there to be no mistake in anybody's mind. Harry Potter escaped me by a lucky chance. And I am now going to prove my power by killing him, here and now, in front of you all, when there is no Dumbledore to help him, and no mother to die for him. I will give him his chance. He will be allowed to fight, and you will be left with no doubt which of us is stronger. Untie him, Crouch, and give him back his wand." "As you wish, Master," Crouch said, pointing his own wand at Harry. The ropes attaching Harry to the gravestone loosened and fell away. "Catch," he said, tossing Harry Cedric's wand. Harry caught it nimbly and stooped up slowly, discreetly using the headstone for support. After 4 crescendos, Harry was pretty shaking on his feet. It's a good thing he wasn't the one who had to be responsible for taking care of Nagini, or he'd be seriously screwed. "You've been taught how to duel, Harry Potters?" Voldemort asked softly. "I've been taught to drop my wand and summon snakes," Harry replied. "Our dueling club was kind of substandard. Do you at least know you're supposed to bow to each other?" Voldemort asked. Harry shrugged. "I don't think we really got around to that, no." "Well, come now. The niceties must be observed. Dumbledore would like you to show some manners." "Bow to death, Harry," Voldemort coaxed. "I'll bow to death only after it bows to me," Harry said firmly. "I said, bow." Voldemort raised his wand, and Harry felt his spine start to curve. Harry threw himself to the ground. Granted, that didn't stop the Death Eater's laughter of Voldemort's amusement, but he did not bow to the man who had killed so many of the people that he loved. Then, of course, he had to climb back to his feet, which was a daunting prospect indeed. He managed it, but not nearly as quickly as he would have liked. "I see living with Muggles has left you tragically bereft of manners." Voldemort shook his head ruefully. "Not that I'm surprised, of course. Still, you might well be able to face me, straight-backed and proud, the way your father died. And now we duel."
Crescendo.
As Harry underwent the Cruciatus Curse for the 5th time that night, and was seriously wishing he'd taken whoever's suggestion of just throwing a rock at the damn cup. When the curse was lifted, Harry was appalled to discover he'd cried out. Still, 1 in 5 wasn't too bad, he supposed. "That hurt, didn't it, Harry?" Voldemort taunted. "You don't want me to do it again, do you?" Harry didn't reply, trying to keep focused. "I asked whether you want me to do that again," Voldemort said softly. "Imperio." "Fine," Harry snapped. "I clearly must on some level, or I'd stop provoking you." That was not what anyone was expecting, and there was nothing but silence as the crows tried to process the fact that a 14-year-old had just broken Voldemort's imperious curse. "Well," Voldemort said quietly, "who am I to deny a dying man his last request?" He raised his wand again, but Harry managed to throw himself behind the headstone he'd been tied to earlier. The stone cracked as Voldemort's crescendo hit it, and Harry winced. He took out his mirror. "Sirius, I need you," he whispered. "Harry's?" Sirius whispered back. "We're ready to mobilize." "Where are you?" "George said Fred and Cedric are with you." Are they alive? I'm in the graveyard, Harry answered. Cedric and Fred are somewhere, but I haven't seen them in a while. They should be fine. Hurry. Chapter 49. Master. I'm being attacked. Nagini hissed. Voldemort stiffened. Attacked? Who would dare dash? Looks like Fred and Cedric were making their move. Only one thing to do. Harry took a deep breath. Even though he'd already survived death, well, a few times really, that didn't mean that he was looking forward to sacrificing himself on purpose. Although the fact he was choosing now to try and keep focus off of Cedric and Fred should mean that they'd be protected once he got back, right? That was how it worked before, at any rate. Of course, then he really thought he'd stay dead, but it was entirely possible that Voldemort would use the killing curse and he'd either stay a Horcrux or stay dead. Oh, who is he kidding? Voldemort had only ever shown himself capable of using the 3 unforgivable curses around him. Although he might have used something else that one time he was fighting Dumbledore in the Ministry. 2 boys, Master. They dash, Nagini abruptly cut off with a hiss of pain. She was either dead or would be soon. Quit stalling, Harry mentally ordered himself. Reluctantly, he stepped out from behind his stone shield. You can't kill me. I can try, Voldemort said simply, raising his wand. Avada Kedavra. Harry looked around him idly. He was at King's Cross again. Why couldn't I be more creative than using a train station as a metaphor for being at a crossroads? Harry murmured. I don't know, but personally I blame your mother, a voice said from behind him. A true marauder would never be that unoriginal. Harry spun around and came face to face with a man who looked very much how he would look in a few years sans the bright green eyes. Oh, and you might want to be aware of the fact that you're naked, James Potter said helpfully. Harry glanced down. So he was. Of course, the moment he became aware of that, he was in robes. Why did he need to be naked in the first place? Honestly. Original, as far as infantile pranks go, maybe, a girl said. Harry glanced over and saw Lily Potter. But you never were one for symbolism. Can't we just blame your relatives for not believing in creativity and attempting to stifle it in our son? James implored. I refuse to admit a relation to that man, Lily insisted, crossing her arms. Petunia's just scared and should never, ever under any circumstances ever have been placed in charge of a magical child. The son, well, he'll probably grow up sooner or later.
Mom? Dad.
Harry could hardly believe it. Who were you expecting? Dumbledore? James asked with a sardonic smirk. Hate to break it to you, kid, but he's not quite dead in this timeline yet. Harry's eyes widened. This timeline? Then, Harry, we're dead. And possibly just manifestations of your subconscious mind, Lily said gently. Of course we know. And? Harry asked, wondering what their verdict would be on all of this. I couldn't be more proud, James said beaming. Aside from that Luna girl and Sirius, who really doesn't count because he also came back, no one knows about the whole time travel thing, and you've done an admirable job to create chaos. Lily nudged him. Oh, and help people. That was good, too. While I may not strictly approve of all the willful mayhem, Lily said. Or just up and leaving your original timeline, the fact that you're trying to end everything now before people start dying is admirable, and I hope you succeed. I didn't mean to come back, Harry pointed out. I wasn't really thinking, it was like I was compelled to. And once I got here, I had no idea how to go back, so I just figured I might as well make the best of it. Really my school days, though, I swear I might have fun sometimes, but I don't recommend trying it. Repeating your schooling is one of the most tedious things I have ever encountered. If I didn't try to liven things up, God knows I would have gone mad by now. That's assuming you're not mad already, Lily said. Harry shrugged. True. But as long as I'm not violently insane, I suppose it doesn't matter. Mental stability's overrated anyway. Here. James cheered. Tell Sirius that I don't blame him for picking Peter to be our secret keeper, will you? Yeah, that turned out to be a really stupid idea, but Lily and I were the ones to agree to it in the end, so I will, Harry said solemnly. He's still a horrible influence, though. And tell Severus I forgive him, Lily requested. If I call him Severus, he's likely to hex me, but all right, Harry agreed. I still don't see what you see in him, James said, shaking his head ruefully. He was my best friend for years, Lily reminded him. And even if the prophecy getting out was all his fault, we would have been in danger anyway. Not that much danger, James countered. Besides, he was a Death Eater. Was being the operative word, Lily told him. He's still alive, but God knows he hasn't been acting like it for 13 years now. He's back on the right side, and needs to move past this. I'm hoping my forgiveness will help. Yeah, I suppose if he died, I might have to see him more, James mused. Let's hope that doesn't happen for a while. I have to go back soon, don't I? Harry asked. Lily nodded. Stay here too long, and you'll lose the opportunity. Thank you for protecting me, Harry said sincerely. Lily smiled softly at him. We're your parents, Harry. That's what parents do. We'll keep watching over you, James promised. After all, we love you. You're rather entertaining, and we really have nothing better to do. Now do us all a favor and go kick Voldemort's ass. I'll try not to disappoint, Harry said dryly. When Harry came to, he felt sore all over. Granted, he was already sore from those 5 crucios, but his body felt like he'd been struck with 5 more while unconscious. Or was it while he was dead? That very well could be the case. My lord, Crouch was saying. Are you all right? I'm fine, Voldemort insisted. Harry chanced to glance over at the snake man and saw him rise to his feet. How about Potter? Is he dead? Harry hoped he could move quickly enough or stun Voldemort enough to do what he needed to do. He sat up and turned his wand on Voldemort. You wish. Voldemort's eyes widened. Pot dash. Harry distantly heard the telltale cracks of apparition, but he ignored them in favor of crying. Out, Avada Kedavra. He wasn't the only one to say it, and a jolt of green light struck Voldemort from the front and the back. As Voldemort fell, Harry locked eyes with his godfather, who slowly lowered his wand. Took you long enough, Harry greeted him. You're the one who wouldn't call for backup until Voldemort had gone and gotten himself reborn, Sirius countered. True, Harry agreed. His eyes felt heavy and his head was swimming. While he knew that passing out in a graveyard full of Death Eaters and, he supposed, Oris about to go at it was probably not one of his better ideas, those crucios and that Avada Kedavra were really starting to take its toll on him. You better not let me die. When Harry woke up, he was back at Hogwarts in the hospital wing.
He sighed.
And I had so hoped to avoid this place. Then maybe you shouldn't have gone and faced down with Voldemort, George said from the next bed over. What are you doing here? Harry asked, confused. George shrugged. Damned if I know. I didn't even get to go with you. They said it was because of the maze, but I noticed that Fleur and Crumb don't need to be here. Where's Cedric? And Fred? Are they all right? Harry asked, concerned. We're right here, Fred said. He and Cedric were on beds on the opposite side of Harry. What's the last thing you remember? Passing out, Harry replied succinctly. And seeing as how I was unconscious after that, I'm not quite sure what else I'm supposed to be remembering. Good point, Fred admitted. So, do you want to know what happened? That would be nice, Harry confirmed. Let me start by saying that you have got to be the craziest person I've ever met, Cedric said. Voldemort was coming back to life and Crucio and you every time you turned around, and you would not stop taunting him. I have no regrets, Harry insisted, crossing his arms. You never do, Cedric sighed. Although maybe if you had let up just a little, you wouldn't have passed out. Fred, and I made sure to put a use that charm you showed us earlier, the Muffliato. We weren't sure what it did, but we figured it must have been some sort of modified silencing charm that let us hear each other to communicate while not letting other people hear us if you were willing to admit we were there while insisting we remained invisible. Harry nodded. Anyone else who got close to you would just hear a sort of buzzing, and unless they were trying to hear what you were saying, which they wouldn't have been since you were invisible, they wouldn't even notice. So Cedric and I weren't sure if we should intervene when you got stunned, and that Crouch guy was doing some sort of ritual, but you didn't really seem all that concerned, and we were looking for that snake. It would have been a lot easier if Cedric hadn't have been on the verge of a panic attack dash, Fred started to say. You try and shake off a year of conditioning that fast, Cedric interrupted. Besides, I could see a lot of sense in Harry's suggestion to run like hell. You know, Seeing sense in anything Harry says doesn't speak very highly of your mental state, George noted. In my defense, a Death Eater was trying to bring back Voldemort, and then more Death Eaters showed up, Cedric said defensively. Just keep telling yourself that, Fred said patronizingly. You know, I would probably be a lot more offended if that weren't true, Harry spoke up. But since it is true, you don't really care? Cedric asked. Harry shrugged. Not really. But go on. What happened after you saw the ritual? Death Eaters were operating all around us, Fred continued. One of them appeared not 6 inches away from us and really freaked us out, so we quickly moved back a little. We saw the snake, but it was right by Voldemort, and so we didn't want to risk it. After Voldemort started explaining his epic quest to kill a teenager, the snake slithered off, and so when everyone was distracted by that duel, Cedric and I stabbed it to death, and then Cedric cut off its head for good measure. Good thinking, Harry said. When Voldemort was bodiless, he apparently tied his life force to Nagini in order to make himself stronger and tie him to the physical world using some obscure ritual. So, in order to kill him, the snake had to go. Are you saying we were partially responsible for killing Voldemort? Cedric looked stunned. Indeed, Harry nodded. That should get you extra credit on your data annute if nothing else. We're lucky your godfather showed up when he did, Fred told him. He must have brought 24 Aurors or so. Once the anti-apparition wards went up, the Death Eaters didn't stand a chance. Did anyone get away? Harry asked, concerned. Just one, Fred answered. I don't know who it was, though. Harry, my boy, you're awake? Fudge asked as he strolled into the hospital wing. Rita Skeeter, Dumbledore, Sirius, and Snape were with him. Yes, sir, Harry nodded. Maybe you can help clear up some of this confusion about this so-called return of he who must not be named, Fudge said hopefully. I think it's obvious what happened, sir. Barty Crouch Jr. was driven insane by the Dementors and somehow managed to escape Azkaban. Since he's supposed to be dead, he probably had help and you should question him on that. He tried to do a dangerous, obscure, and probably illegal ritual to summon Voldemort's spirit back to this world in a makeshift body. The ritual heavily depended on a snake named Nagini, which Cedric and Fred managed to kill. Crouch brought me there for Voldemort to kill, but fortunately my godfather and I managed to destroy it. Then, the fact that I'm here now means that our wonderfully competent Aurors took care of any others who showed up to see if Crouch's delusions had any basis in fact. Can I quote you on that? Rita asked eagerly. Harry nodded. That's my official statement, and I won't be saying anything more on the matter until I've recovered. Faux Voldemort crush'd me 5 times, you know? Fudge winced at that. Well, it's a good thing you're all right, and that monstrosity was put down, and the escaped Death Eater caught. I need to go deal with the fallout now, but first, who actually won the Pentawizard playoffs? I need to give out the winnings and make an announcement. It was a tie, Harry explained. Fred, Cedric, and I all touched it at the same time, and that's how we got transported to the graveyard. Crouch Jr. must have made it a portkey, although I have no idea how he managed to do that. About that, Fudge looked a little awkward. Turns out he'd been using Polyjuice to replace his father all year. Since he was busy with his little ritual, tonight he sent his father under an imperious curse to be a judge. It looks like it's wearing off, so we should be able to question him about his involvement soon enough. Normally, there would be a presentation ceremony, but under the circumstance, with that, he tossed a bag of galleons at Harry and left, Rita hurrying after him. Harry, why did you tell Minister Fudge that wasn't really Voldemort? Dumbledore asked reprovingly. Because even if Voldemort got killed relatively quickly, the fact he came back once could mean that he could come back again, and since the last thing Fudge wants to do is be known as the minister who let Voldemort come back, there is no way he would ever admit it. It's better to give him a nice public-friendly version than to have him try and destroy our credibility, Harry replied matter-of-factly. But Voldemort can come back, and once more he will, Dumbledore said, looking older than he normally did. Actually, Professor, you'll find that he won't, Harry corrected. I know all about his Horcruxes. When I fought the diary him in the chamber, I showed it to Sirius and he recognized it as a Horcrux. My family was always rather dark, Sirius piped up. We decided that even he wouldn't be so careless with his soul as to hand it off to Wormtail for safekeeping, so there might be more. It took some time, but we eventually managed to get Hufflepuff's cup from Bellatrix's vault, Slytherin's locket from my house. You had one of the Dark Lord's Horcruxes in your house? Snape interjected skeptically. Sirius shrugged. I already mentioned my family was dark. But in this case, my brother found out about them, turned on Voldemort, and took it, but he died before figuring out how to destroy them. How did you manage to destroy them? Dumbledore asked, intrigued. Fiend fire, mostly, but we did use a bit of the basilisk venom Harry got from the chamber, Sirius replied. We found Ravenclaw's diadem hidden here at Hogwarts and Slytherin's ring at Voldemort's maternal family's house not too far from that graveyard. Then it was Harry's turn. I suspected Nagini might be one, so I had Fred and Cedric kill it, and I realized I was one as well. So while I was fully prepared to give my life to see Voldemort destroyed, the fact that he used my blood to bring himself back meant that he anchored me to this world while destroying his own Horcrux. You died? Sirius looked alarmed. I told you I was going to, Harry pointed out. Yeah, but still I've got to be the worst guardian ever, Sirius said mournfully. There is very little you could do to make you worse than my previous guardians, Harry tried to comfort him. Considering they kept you in a cupboard, that's really not saying much. Sirius shot back. Well, while I was dead I met my parents, Harry told him. My dad said he didn't blame you, and even if you suggested Pettigrew, he and Mum had the final say. Then Mum said that you're still a horrible influence, and to tell someone named Severus that she forgave him, and that since he was still alive, he should start acting like it. Oh, and Dad said that he wanted him to stay alive, too, if only so he wouldn't have to deal with him. Snape blinked at that, but said nothing. Not that Harry really expected him to. Your mum said I was a horrible influence? Sirius brightened at the thought. I've still got it. These revelations are quite surprising, Dumbledore said. Why didn't you tell me about your Horcrux hunt? I was afraid that if I did you might shut me out because of my age, and I felt it was something I needed to take care of on my own, Harry replied, semi-honestly. Sirius and I had it covered, and if we needed help, we would have asked for it. Besides, you had the same starting information that we did, so you were free to make the Horcrux connection and start looking for them yourself independent of us.
I see, Dumbledore said.
I'll need to see the two of you in my office to see what our next move is, he told Snape and Sirius. Once the three of them left, George said casually, So, about those winnings? You can have my share if you make me a partner in the joke shop you start with it, Harry said immediately. What? Fred looked gobsmacked. That's over 300 galleons.
Positive, Harry said.
I should make at least a third of that selling my exclusive anyway. Cedric appeared to be thinking something over. Finally, he said, Me too? George looked at him uncomprehendingly. You too? You can have my share, too. I don't really need the money as we've got another year of schooling, and so long as I can be a partner in your shop and see a return on my investment when you guys are wildly successful, which everyone knows you will be, then it will be worth it, Cedric said firmly. Besides, after tonight, I think that's exactly what everyone needs. I thank you, Fred said, accepting the bag of galleons Harry held out to him. How can we ever repay you? George asked. By making us ridiculously wealthy when you make it big, Harry replied. And not using us as test subjects, Cedric added. And not letting your mum kill us too much for this, Harry finished. We make no promises, Fred smirked. Chapter 50. Death Eater Plot to Revive You-Know-Who Foiled by Potter. By Rita Skeeter. The third task of the Pennywizard playoffs proved to be something to behold, and it did not disappoint. What no one expected was the after-playoff entertainment. Bartemius Crouch Jr., not quite so dead as his father would have us believe, abducted champions Harry Potter, Fred Weasley, and Cedric Diggory from inside the third task maze with the intention of sending us back to the terror of 13 years ago. Crouch attempted to use these boys in an elaborate and insidious ritual to bring back he who must not be named. Fortunately, the ritual merely produced a golem who was quickly brought down by the combined efforts of Potter and Sirius Black. While Weasley and Diggory were off destroying the snake that the ritual used to keep the golem alive, Potter called for reinforcements on his two-way mirror and black, eager to make up for his stunning failure as a guardian until 2 years ago, delivered in the form of 24 oars. Needless to say, the Ministry's finest had no problem rounding up those who still secretly wished to serve you-know-who and came to see if Crouch could really revive him. He couldn't. How, you might ask, did Crouch get to be in such a position as to kidnap some of Hogwarts' best students and drawing he-who-must-not-be-named's old followers to his side as he attempted a bit of ill-fated necromancy when he is supposed to be dead himself? Interesting question with an even more interesting answer. Crouch Jr.'s mother died shortly after he did many years ago, or so we thought. It turns out that while she did indeed die, she did not do it in her home, but in Azkaban prison. Knowing she was dying and her husband would do anything for her, the late Mrs. Crouch begged her husband to smuggle him out with polyjuice and died in his place. As Crouch Jr. was undoubtedly a Death Eater, Crouch Sr. kept him under the Imperious curse until one day Jr.'s resistance became so great that he overpowered his father and started off on his mad quest to bring back his Dark Master. Crouch Sr. is facing charges for his actions, and Azkaban prison is increasing their security after 2 people have escaped, one of which left completely unnoticed. The arrested Death Eaters turned out to be, much to everyone's surprise and horror, seemingly respectable members of our community who had faced accusations of Death Eater activity in the past, but either bribed the previous, clearly corrupt administration or pleaded being under the Imperious curse. As Lucius Malfoy, a true victim of the Imperious curse back in the day, put it, it truly saddens me that so many people that I had counted as friends could take advantage of my suffering and the suffering of others like me similarly affected by that dreadful curse to escape prison and then turn right around and take the first opportunity to seek out their master. Continued on page 5. Unbelievable, Harry said, shaking his head and putting the newspaper down. How does your father always manage to land on his feet, Draco? Once again, it was the end of the year feast, and Harry was seeking solace with the Slytherins. I don't know what you mean, Harry, Draco said cheerfully. But I agree with him. War is such a terrible thing, and aren't we lucky to have avoided it? Oh, whatever, Harry huffed. I saw him in that graveyard, you know. Really? Draco drawled. I thought you said they were all wearing masks, and you can't possibly have spent enough time with my father to be able to accurately pick out his voice among others during such a time of duress. The golem called him Lucius, Harry protested. How would a golem know? Draco asked reasonably. And if he was there, he would be in custody, simple as that. Apparently one escaped, Harry pointed out. I'm not sure how, though, since the Aurors put up anti-apparition wards pretty quickly. Maybe whoever it was carrying around a portkey, Draco suggested. Mum always insists that all of us have one on us at all times, although it doesn't work within the castle. So, you're suggesting that someone else just happened to be carrying around a portkey like your father does? Harry asked skeptically. We both know it was him. Good luck proving it, Draco said with a smirk. So why won't anyone else talk to me? Harry wondered. Apparently I'm still not allowed, Blaise replied dryly. Don't encourage him, Daphne said absently.
See,
Blaise cried. The subject matter bores me, Pansy sniffed. You got my father arrested, Theodore Knott said, looking at Harry like he was stupid. Then again, that's how he usually looked at Harry, so he wasn't concerned. I did not, Harry insisted. He got himself arrested by appearing at a madman's side who was trying to kill me, and since Crouch summoned everyone through his dark mark, everyone caught was obviously a Death Eater, no matter what their bank account has to say about it. That is true, Theodore acknowledged. But it's still a bad situation, and I never liked you to begin with. But we've been through so much together. Harry objected. Most of it your fault and all of it annoying, Theodore reminded him. Excuse me, Harry? Fleur's voice sounded from behind him. Harry turned around to see Victor Crumb was with her. Would like to congratulate you on your victory, Victor told him. Even though Vish could have won, I am sure that whatever happened in the graveyard more than earned you your victory. Thanks, Harry said, touched. How did Beauxbatons and Durmstrang take it? They did not take the fact that all 3 Hogwarts champions won very well, Fleur admitted. which is why we are seeking you out as everyone else is packing. Well, that's nice of you, Harry told her. It was great meeting you guys this year, and I'm warning you now that if you don't keep in touch, I'm going to have to personally come to France and/or Bulgaria and visit you. Fleur and Crumb exchanged horrified glances. We'll keep in touch, Crumb promised. Yes, most definitely. Fleur agreed. The two champions practically ran from the Great Hall. Strange. Attention, everyone, Dumbledore said, standing up and waiting for the Great Hall to quiet down. Before I go ahead and release the point totals, Professor Lockhart has an announcement to make. Why is he even still here? Harry wondered. Draco shrugged. Free publicity, I'm guessing. Thank you, Professor Dumbledore, Lockhart said, beaming at everyone. First off, I would like to say that this has been an amazing year. Being back here, seeing how much you've grown, it's been a wonderful experience. To be honest, I was a bit hesitant about being a headmaster because I've only had 1 year of teaching experience, though I was certainly more than qualified. Young Harry was very persistent, however, and I'm glad he was, as it was a truly rewarding experience for me. That's why I'd like to announce that as of right now, the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness will be accepting transfer requests, and I hope to see some of you next year. Thank you, Professor Lockhart, or should I say Headmaster? Dumbledore asked rhetorically. Next, I am pleased to announce that our very own Professor Moody has agreed to stay on and teach another year to prove that there is no such thing as a curse on the position and to rid me of a long-term staffing woe. And finally, the point tallies. As things stand, Hufflepuff is in 4th place with 867. Ravenclaw is in 3rd place with 916 points. Slytherin is in 2nd with 1037 points, and Gryffindor, of course, is in the lead with 1177 points. Of course, I love it how he's not even pretending to be objective anymore, Draco muttered. Stupid blatant favoritism. I'm just as outraged as you are, Harry assured him. Of course, due to recent events, I am going to award Hufflepuff 500 points for their champion Cedric Diggory winning the Pentawizard playoffs and 1,000 points to Gryffindor for Harry and Fred Weasley for having done the same, Dumbledore announced. That brings Hufflepuff up to 2nd place with 1,367 points and Gryffindor still in 1st with 2,177 points. Why is it that Gryffindor wins every year with last-minute Harry-related points and Ravenclaw and now Hufflepuff have benefited from association with his deeds, but Slytherin never gets anything despite Harry spending more time with us than he does with any member of another house besides Luna Lovegood? Blaise complained. Harry opened his mouth to reply, but Daphne beat him to it. Blaise, you're encouraging him again, she hissed. Oh, for the love of Dash. So just between us, Voldemort actually came back and you killed him, right? Neville asked once they were on the train ride home. Harry smirked. Totally.
What?
Hermione looked startled. You killed someone? But you're only 14. Think of the irreparable damage this will surely do to your soul. Harry held up a hand to stop her. Hermione, this is Lord Tom Riddle Voldemort we're talking about. He kind of had it coming. Besides, he was already mostly dead. I'm fairly certain you already used that reference, Luna told him. Harry shuddered. How unoriginal. In my defense, though, I was talking about the same person, and it was 2 years ago. Then how do you even remember that? Ron wanted to know. Harry turned to stare at him incredulously. Because The Princess Bride is one of the most epic movies ever. How could I not remember it? Ginny snorted. Since when do you care about epic? You put off doing anything until Voldemort himself showed up. At least I did something then. Harry defended himself. And I didn't have to. I could have just called Sirius immediately and have had the Aurors deal with it. For all I know, that's exactly what happened, Ginny pointed out. Since you released such a Chamber of Secrets version to the press. What does she mean, Chamber of Secrets version, Harry? Ron asked, frowning. Doctored beyond belief? Harry guessed silently. Out loud he said, presumably epic, since that was what my defeat of the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets was. I have very rarely seen its match, Ginny swore. And it's not like I escaped unscathed, Harry told them. My psychic, Parselmouth scar took an Avada Kedavra for me. You got hit with an Avada Kedavra? Hermione cried. No. Harry shook his head. My scar did. Don't you listen? I just never mind, Hermione said, deciding once again that it simply wasn't worth it. So, how put out are you that I won the playoffs? Harry asked Luna. Luna looked mystified for once. I was your representative on the panel of judges. Why in the world would I be upset? You consistently gave me a lower score than everyone but Victor, Harry offered. Only for caring more for showmanship than the tasks themselves, Luna reminded him. But as far as the maze goes, well, if that Sphinx is to believe you tried harder and really need to brush up on your basic riddles. You wouldn't have lasted 1 week in Ravenclaw if it took you 10 minutes to get glove. Yeah, well, no one asked you, Harry exclaimed. Luna raised her eyebrows. Really? Because I could have sworn you just did. Why couldn't you just tell what really happened, Harry? Hermione inquired. I mean, sure, it would have been a bit scary to know that Voldemort has been out there all this time, but if he's gone now, why not put everyone's mind at ease? Neville laughed. Right, because telling everyone that someone that nearly everyone you meet who hasn't met him personally or taken classes with Sirius and basically been bribed is afraid to say the name of wasn't dead after all but wandering around doing God knows what for 13 years would go over well. What are they supposed to say? Yeah, he wasn't really dead last time, are bad, but this time he is, we swear. If losing one body wasn't enough, why would losing a second be any more lethal? Because of the Horcruxes, of course, Hermione began. I'm sure that if Yeah, there's no way that bit of information is coming out, Harry said firmly. Strictly speaking, I probably shouldn't have even told you guys. Although I really don't remember why I saw fit to tell you guys that, and not about Voldemort having actually been back. Rackspurts, Luna suggested. Seriously, someone ought to do something about them, Harry said vehemently. Most people haven't even heard of Horcruxes, because if people, especially unscrupulous people who have already killed, found out about such a convenient and relatively safe method for relative immortality, people would use it. Besides, the Ministry is very happy to keep Voldemort's return away from the public eye, and the public is ecstatic not to be aware of what almost happened, so who am I to go against the will of the people? I'm not even going to answer that, Ginny said, shaking her head. At least she seemed more amused than hostile. So, what are we going to do this summer, Sirius? Harry asked once he met his guardian on the platform. The same thing we do every summer, Harry, Sirius replied with a grin. Try to take over the world? Harry asked innocently. Yeah, that settles it. You two are not allowed to be left alone together, Remus declared. Harry looked over to see his backup godfather and Tonks standing a few feet away. Hey, what are you guys doing here? Didn't I just say I refuse to leave you two alone together? Remus asked. Well, yeah, Harry admitted. But you kind of made it sound like you just decided that. We never thought it was a good idea, Tonks explained. But our determination to keep the time you two spend alone to a bare minimum is new. Yes, you never let me have any fun, Sirius sulked. Forgive me if I don't find taking over the world to be as thrilling as you two apparently do, Remus said dryly. Of course, Sirius said magnanimously. After all, you've never tried it. This is my best friend, Remus said despondently. There, Tonks said, patting Remus on the shoulder. At least you're not related to him. Are you guys sure you're not dating? Harry asked. They better not be, Sirius growled. Well, at least for another year or so. But after that I expect to see some sparks flying. You can't force us to date, Sirius, Remus felt compelled to remind him. No, Sirius agreed readily enough. But I can force you guys to hang out until your hormones overwhelm you, and you have no choice. I feel so used, Remus complained. At least I'm awesome, Tonks consoled him, looking like she wouldn't mind not waiting. So, Cedric, tell us about the graveyard dash, Marietta Edgecombe was saying. Cedric's eyes widened, and he started breathing faster. God, Marietta, he's just been through a traumatic experience. Cho snapped. Show some respect. What did I do? Marietta wondered. Thank you so much for that, Cedric said sarcastically as he met Harry's eye. Hey, Harry protested. I saved your life. And I'm grateful, Cedric allowed, but I have never been more aware that people spend a ridiculous amount of time talking about the G word until now. You can send me your therapy bill, Harry offered. It's probably tax-deductible. Cedric rolled his eyes but moved on. Congratulations on your recent defeat of that golem, Narcissa Malfoy said as she, her husband, and her son approached him. Harry shivered. Thank you. And may I say that you terrify me far more than that golem did despite the 5 crucios. Narcissa blinked at him. Really, you do say the strangest things. That's because he's crazy, Draco added helpfully. So not helping, Harry snapped at him. We are grateful for the service you've done us all, Lucius claimed. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have to go commiserate with those poor, unsuspecting family members of Death Eaters. Well, the Malfoys certainly knew how to keep themselves above the fray. Well, when they weren't caught red-handed at the Department of Mysteries, that is. Voldemort's really gone for good this time, Sirius said softly. I never thought I'd see the day. I did, Harry replied. Of course, it's a lot less bittersweet than before. James and Lily would be proud of you, Harry, Remus assured him. Harry smiled at him. Thanks, Remus. And then, as they continued blissfully into this small but perfect piece of their forever, Harry knew that all was well. So, what's this about you funding the twins' pranks? Molly Weasley demanded, hands on her hips and looking murderous. Behind her, the twins were mouthing sorry at him, not looking even remotely sincere. I can explain, Harry said immediately. Please do, Molly said, her eyes flashing, and Harry was suddenly very much aware that this was the woman who, in another life, had taken down Bellatrix Lestrange. Well, some things were kind of well. Assuming he survived this next confrontation, of course. The end. Thank you for joining us on this magical journey with Grimoire Audiobooks. We've reached the grand finale of Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281. This time-twisting tale has been an unforgettable adventure filled with laughter, surprises, and heartfelt moments. The conclusion has left us marveling at the boundless possibilities of magic and storytelling. If you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have, don't forget to show your support by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Once this video hits 50 likes and 50 comments, we'll know you're ready for more incredible tales. Your enthusiasm fuels our magical endeavors. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the Grimoire Audiobooks family. Stay tuned for more enchanting adventures, and as always, may your days be filled with magic and wonder.